Yeah, that's why I like. Welcome back, everyone, to the Talent Talks podcast, the show where we discuss the mental, emotional, and spiritual journey of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Paul Drake Verk, aka the Ukrainian Pavlodar. I'm the founder of Wild Outdoor Apparel and the co-founder of Talent Trails, where we specialize in helping businesses expand by sourcing top-tier international talent. With a rich background in marketing strategy and team leadership and lead generation, I've spent years doing the work and learning in the trenches. Today, we welcome Cameron Rowe, the innovative CEO and founder of Hover. Cameron, a Queen's University alumni and an alumni of the same high school that we went together, Leaside.
Shout out LHS.
LHS right there. Has been making headlines with Hover, his drone delivery service that's changing the game in last mile delivery. Not just a tech revolutionary, Cameron has also showcased his entrepreneurial spirit on the popular show Dragon's Den. Hover, known for delivering everything from food to essentials in areas like the Toronto Islands, is a testament to Cameron's foresight in tech and business. Join us as we delve into his journey, the rise of Hover, and the future of drone delivery. Let's get started. Cameron, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks. How are you, Paul?
I'm fantastic, man. I can't believe it, eh? Like, we were just talking about this earlier today. Like, in high school, like, I know who you were. You knew who I was. Like, we kind of hung out. We went to the same parties there and there, but we never actually like connect or anything.
Adriano's parties,
Adriano's parties, I remember. Those were wild.
You know, he helped out a lot actually with Hover, kind of an interesting segue. We lived together as well afterwards in the house for like a year and a half or something like that.
Did you guys both go to Queens?
No, we didn't. He went to Schulich here.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys were living together afterwards?
We were, yeah. So this was after I had finished graduating my undergrad and my master's at Queen's University. I had spent a year in Ottawa, and then I remember chatting with him a little bit. We came back, and it was just the most fun we've had, and we also got a ton of work done. That was kind of the start of my journey back in Toronto, working on Hover.
100%. And I feel like it's so much easier to like do things when you have like a partner that's also like is having similar goals. Because I remember when I was founding Wild, like the hat brand, like it was just all me, and it was so hard because I couldn't bounce ideas off someone, and like if you're lazy and there's no one to say like, come on bro, you know what I mean? So I totally get that. So I just want to have a little bit of, before we dive into it, I kind of want to know a little bit more about like your early experiences and kind of what shaped your journey of entrepreneurship. So when you were kind of growing up, was there any specific role models or any kind of like situations that you remember that kind of formed your perspective around entrepreneurship or what you wanted to do in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was definitely the most formative individual in my life that had the biggest impact by far on sort of my future drive, what I wanted to do. I think it's funny because my mom has her master's, and so she was the one who pushed me to get my master's. But my dad was also the one who said, hey, you know what? Work on the business, like try it as well in tandem. And so I found a master's that kind of aligned really well with it. And he, from an early age, had pushed me to do entrepreneurial things. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that was super helpful because not only did I have him as a role model, I had their support as well. And I was able to call someone up. And so, as you mentioned earlier, it's really hard. I am a solo founder, and that is a challenging thing to
100%.
be. And so having a support network of my dad, my family, Adriano for one was huge as well during those years, and other friends, as well as other entrepreneurial networks that I had done over the past, 7 years now or so since I was in third year at Queen's University. It has given me a network where I haven't really felt alone, although sometimes there are those instances where it would be nice to have someone else to kind of not only validate, but challenge you in a way. And so creating a support network, I think I've done a good job at doing that. And as well as just having somebody to kind of aspire to be as well.
And I think that's so important. Like one of the things you mentioned there is like having, because I'm somewhat in the similar boat. Like my mother was all about, my mother grew up in the Soviet Union. So her thing was like all security. Yeah. So she always kind of pushed me towards get a school, get a job, the safe venture. But I think it's so important and so crucial in the beginning to have like this strong father figure who does push you in like these like ways that aren't exactly traditional or aren't exactly the way that the mainstream society is going. So like just have someone to push you in that direction, I think has a big value in forming like your identity in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you remember like any key things that he said, or is there like any key stories
Yes.
that's something that sticks in your mind out?
You know, actually the funniest thing that it's almost, you could somebody could take this the wrong way for sure.
Yeah.
At the beginning, at January 2022, so I had some traction, but I hadn't yet launched the drone delivery portion of the business. I guess in a way we pivoted. We still do a lot of the regular services as well, but I was at their house in Ottawa, and we were chatting a little bit more about what I was planning for the future with the company, because at this point in time, I had been now unemployed for 2 years or so, a year and a half. And so while I was making money, it wasn't like a life-changing amount yet. And so it was one of those things that he had come up to me, and I had developed this whole plan of what would drone delivery look like. Mm-hmm. And he had really questioned me hard. And in a way that was, you could interpret it as really a negative signal, but I actually interpreted it as positive, where he was willing to challenge me and say, make sure that you're focusing your time on, he cares so much about me. He wants to ensure I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah.
And so he was pushing me, and now he's super supportive. And even shortly after that, they had been super great in not just the emotional support, but even my mom will edit some of my marketing papers, and she will sort of review some of the documents that I've created. This was at the beginning of 2022. Mm-hmm. And so while they're questioning me, it's doing it in a place where this is a lot of money that I would be committing. It's a lot of time and effort. And so they want to make sure it was well thought out. And I think it's also, if you're able to be kind of flip-flopped by people simply saying, hey, how's this going to work? This is going to be really difficult. Like Amazon's been trying to do drone delivery for a while.
Yeah.
Then maybe you're not the right person to do it. And so I think it was a really formative sort of, it thickened my skin a little bit to sort of say, no, I actually believe I can. And I think that's honestly half the battle.
And what you said there really resonates with me, because I had the same, when I was starting the hat company, like my mom was like, this isn't going to work. Like she didn't say that to my face, but she kind of like, I kind of felt it.
I got it to my face a little bit there. Yeah,
exactly. But I think that my parents would have been able to question me deeply on it, except I don't think I had like the emotional maturity to take it. Because every time they talked about it, I would just like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, or I'd come away. So it seems to me that like, you welcomed it in a sense. You're like, okay, you're right. Like, so it kind of helped you like when there's a diamond, you're supposed to cut it, right? So it kind of like help you rough out around the edges, right?
Definitely. I mean, it still kind of felt like a slap in the face a little bit, but it's like anything is a slap in the face. Like if you came to me, hey man, I want to give you some personal feedback. Like that's hard. There are very few people in your life that can do that. And many of my friends, I might not even approach it to them. And so this is the type of thing where it depends how you look at it. And if you internalize everything and say, oh, it's like, why are they doing this to me? Instead of just like, they want me to be the best I can be. And it's like, these are my parents. They literally created me. So it's like, they have some level of say in terms of, hey, how's it going? Like, and I think that actually helped a lot for me to almost have a little bit of deference to them, to sort of say, I will listen to you. You deserve my respect and my empathy. Where I think it would have been harder, some people in my life, if they had come to me and said that. And it's the way that people do it as well. It's like, if you come in a respectful way, most things are very manageable.
Yeah, I think it's because your parents they do want you to succeed. They do want you to do well. And it's interesting because like at the end of the day, my mom was kind of right. You know, like she told me about this business town trust. Like, yeah, this is going to work. So your mom kind of always knows, you know, which is kind of funny.
They always know.
They always know.
I texted her that a couple of weeks ago, just like, you're always right. Like everything
they're always right.
Said, they're always right. Yeah. They're literally us, but just 20, 30 years in the future.
Exactly. They've
and we forget that sometimes. Yeah. And we're like, oh, this is all so new. Let's go explore. It's so exciting. But they're like, hey, careful now. Don't overextend. So
how do you manage, this was my struggle. And I want to know this. How do you manage like the dichotomy of, I'm doing something they've never done. They have never done this. So, and you hear a lot in the entrepreneur space, like if they haven't done it, why you're listening to them?
Yeah.
So how do you manage between like listening to the advice they give and also being like, okay, but take it with a grain of salt?
Yeah, that was super tough. My dad had never raised, like, he's a very smart, successful entrepreneur, but he had never raised any external funding. And so I came in super hot with this. Like I was in multiple different incubators, and the main focus of the incubators that they were pushing was this sort of VC unicorn status. And I think I have mixed feelings towards that, because a lot of these companies end up raising a ton of money and failing. But I think the way that we had approached it, which was still maintain strong cash flow, but invest heavily and raise money if you need to in ideas that you believe will scale rapidly, that's where the drone delivery idea came in. And that was where it definitely was more of a disconnect. But at times it's more about confidence in yourself. It's about not always having every answer to every question, but still understanding, hey, we've done the best that we can to prep. Let's focus on a launch. And so I think that's really what my mindset was, where I was like, I do not want to be sitting in Toronto looking out my condo window and seeing drones fly by doing deliveries. And I'm not a part of that. 100%. And I think to me, that was the biggest motivator, where I was like, does it really matter if the people that I really care about say, hey, maybe this isn't for me? It's like, well, they haven't gone through my experiences. They haven't done the years building the licenses, building and flying these actual drones and doing all these services. So they're not understanding, they're not seeing the same articles I am. Like my LinkedIn feed is just full of drones. I catered it to be that way. So I'm aware of what the industry is progressing at, but it just, you have to kind of still trust your own gut, even with your parents. And I think that's like everything. You can't be exactly like them.
Yeah.
You don't want to be exactly like them, but it's okay from an emotional standpoint, from a physical well-being standpoint, as well as to be challenged. That's super important. People who have no sort of involvement in it, like my mom has no idea about drones, but she is able to kind of distill the information I give her into, this is what we're doing for the customer, this is how much we're charging, this is how often we're doing it, and understand, sort of build this sort of value mapping almost about like, hey, what is a good use of his time? Is it worth it? Is he wasting time? And so I think a lot of the times they're there to just catch you in the event of a failure. I think in the upside, they have no idea I don't even know half the time about where some of the industry regulations are going. We're kind of making our best guesses with the information we have.
And the good thing about mothers is like, there's such a good like sample size of the average consumer. Like if you tell your mom like, hey, I'm doing drone delivery, she's like, oh, I don't get it. How does that, like, you know what I mean? So like right away, like I heard this example. It's like, well, if you're doing massage oil, right? If you're doing massage oil, you're like, you go to your mom, hey, is this massage parlor going to work? It's like, how much it costs? Yeah. You know, some people are like, oh, we use the best massage oil. It's like, well, it's all the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so they do have like really good market research. So Cameron, back in 2018, hover was just an idea. So what was the defining moment that made you believe like this could be your life's work or a part of your journey?
I was in Kingston, actually. I think it was at the Mod Club, hilariously enough, which is shut down now, which is like I think it was a Wednesday night. It was a restaurant, but Wednesday night they had like throwbacks and it was very popular at the time. And then now they like tore it down and made it this massive student complex for housing. I remember sitting there with a couple other people who were in the entrepreneurial program that I was in. It's called DDQIC. It was really cool. It basically gave you a little bit of money and funding, and we had worked on a separate idea, but during that time frame, I had spent time with some of these people one of whom was a commercial real estate agent. And he was like, oh, you know, I heard you kind of have been messing around with these. I've been building and flying these drones for a long time. And he was like, oh, could you take videos of a new property that we have that's going to be a listing? And so for $500, I went and I filmed it, edited it, and sent it off to him. And that was when I said, oh, this could be a business. And I incorporated it there on the spot. And so for me, $500 was also a huge amount of money. I was like,
a student.
Oh yeah, there's rent for the month, or like beer money. Like,
exactly.
There's tons of things you can do with that amount of money, and that was like.
And you already like flying drones. Like you've already been.
I already had it, yeah. And so that was the kind of the first avenue where I actually put a $2,000 charge on my credit card to buy a new drone that was a bit better than the one I had.
Wow.
To be able to do further jobs, and it kind of spiraled from there. We did a lot of work with like Tridel, Colliers, CBRE, a lot of these major sort of commercial real estate companies then transferred into more of the construction space, which we still have contracts today that we're doing on a monthly basis, which is just fantastic for cash flow. It allows me to kind of have rent paid in circumstances and then not have to kind of draw from the money that I've raised for personal expenses. I don't need to draw a salary yet. I can focus on hiring people and building out the actual operations and scaling it up.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, I don't think we mentioned this. Like, if you want to explain, like, what actually is Hover, and what are you currently into right now?
So Hover is essentially, we do a ton of different things. The main focus that I think is the reason we're talking on the podcast is autonomous drone delivery. So we will ship you by drone pretty much anything that you can fit on the drone's payload. So it's about 10 pounds that we can fit over a range of 5 kilometers. And so we've specifically started doing this on the Toronto Islands, which is just a small chain of islands off the lakeshore downtown
and it's
Toronto.
Boot shaped. I remember from your pitch on Dragon's Den, it was boot shaped. Yeah.
And so we will fly essentially whatever you need. The most popular things have actually been like Popeyes and McDonald's, 2 people there. And so not only the residents that are there, of which there are 700, but anyone who visits. It's a very popular spot. There's up to 10,000 people per day that are traveling there on the weekends who are trying to enjoy their time. And so not only is there a demand, but it's something that we can actually do given our expertise in this space. So we decided to just launch, and that's where we are today.
Are you flying like where the ferry would take you? You're flying that whole distance? The range is that big?
So the short answer is yes, the range is that big, but no, we fly from Cherry Beach. And so it also doesn't go, it goes parallel instead of perpendicular to the flight paths. And so given our experience, like to get a drone license, you essentially need to take a test that many pilots have failed. It's quite a difficult test to operate close to the airport. So everyone Googles, at the beginning, we got a lot of people, oh, you're not allowed to fly here. And because everyone Googles, oh, drone regulations, can you fly close to an airport? Because Billy Bishop is in Toronto, right on the waterfront on the same chain of islands. But the reality is, when you have the advanced licenses, when you have the insurance, when you have the proper documentation and you're following the rules, we are allowed to do this. And so previously in January, as I was mentioning, that's what a lot of the work went into. Getting all of the licenses to be able to deliver cargo by a drone, getting all of the advanced licenses, ensuring that the drones had a lot of testing in place so that when we submitted our flight plans, they were immediately authorized. And so this was the type of thing that we did with the full approval of not only Transport Canada, but Toronto Ports Authority, which manages not only the ports, but also Billy Bishop security. So from a safety perspective, everything was handled. So a lot of people will say, hey, are you flying directly across the water? And it's like, no, it's actually only about 1.5 kilometer flight. So it was super quick as well.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. And it allowed us to not only have many flights really quickly, but ensure that it was safe, that we're flying super low. We're not sort of endangering anybody. We're flying over the waters, and where we're landing is a safe spot with nobody there.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. And the one question I have is like, so we obviously, like when you think of drone delivery, it sounds like the future, and we've been hearing it for a while now. So why do you think it's not like as popularized or as mainstream as like I think it should be right now?
Great question. I think that was something like 2013, I believe Amazon announced it, and it's something that people have been kind of working on for the past decade, really. In 2019 was when Google Wing, which is like a subsidiary of Google, they had launched from their Moonshot projects a drone delivery platform, and that has been successful in Australia, and they're coming to the States as well to do the deliveries. The main focus is because people are trying to deliver everything. So Amazon is trying to deliver, if you kind of saw downstairs at the front desk how many packages were waiting there and how many different sizes and weights there were, it's very difficult to design a drone that can deliver all of those packages. So you have to restrict the number of things that can be delivered by drone to a weight or volume. And so when you have both weight and volume involved, plus now you have distance, because the drones can't just fly 100 kilometers. It also doesn't make sense. You don't want to pay $50 for a delivery. You just want to pay as little as possible.
Exactly.
So the goal is to minimize the weight and also minimize the distance. And so the way to do that has the most volume is food delivery. Mm-hmm. And so that is designed to be, most deliveries are like sub 5 kilometers. So for us, we're not restricting ourselves as much as many of the other companies are when they're trying to do like mail, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a big reason why drone delivery hasn't gone for the companies like Amazon, but it is coming. This year is going to be huge for it because a bunch of these regulatory approvals just got passed in many different countries around the world, especially in the States. And that's part of the reason why we're in San Francisco, to not only raise more money, but to actually launch and do projects with companies like Pizza.
Interesting. So in terms of like when you're food delivery, because from my perspective, it's like if I would get Uber Eats, and if it's like, so for me to get drone delivery, it would have to be cheaper or faster, right? So you'd have to compete on like quickness and convenience. So is that kind of like how you're structuring it, or how does that work?
Yes. I think that we're so early as well. There is a novel aspect as well that offsets. We did A/B testing, which is kind of seeing how much people would pay for the package. And we did free to $5 to $10 to $20 for delivery. And it was very, very sticky regardless of what price that we picked.
Oh, okay.
We realized though that there's you can't charge $20 for a $50 order or something like that. So we had said, let's settle on $5 to $10 depending on the volume. And so for us, that was the sweet spot where that is roughly how much Uber Eats charges. In the long term, that was because our pilot was on the Toronto Islands. In the long term, we actually want to get that down to $1 or $2. And then you also don't have to tip. And so I think the focus for us is how can we do that? and what deliveries can get us there. So the one that we just ordered for lunch there, it was like $60 for the 2 meals. And I think I paid like taxes, tips, and all this probably was an extra $25 in total.
Oh yeah, it's always like the way they design it, and you're like, okay, I'm willing to pay this, but at the last second,
snowing, and her scooter broke down, so now she had to walk, and it was an hour. And then the restaurant, it's like, how do they split the tip? So now I can't tip the restaurant or the driver,
and it's
like,
annoying.
It's kind of annoying. Yeah,
it's really annoying. And the thing is, like, I noticed the closer you order, the slower it comes because they send the bike or the walker.
And then the restaurants are pissed because they have to write at the end of each month, they write these 20 to 30% checks to Uber, DoorDash, because that's the fee to participate off the top line. So how do they do that? They raise the prices. And so now all of a sudden, you as the consumer go, what the hell is this? Everything's more expensive than if I were to walk in store. And so it adds these layers of friction that we're saying we want to take away those layers. We want to make it as easy as possible.
You explaining it that way, like, okay, like I get that. That totally makes sense because nothing pisses me off more is like when I'm ordering Uber, I'm like, okay, I'm okay to spend $25, but then it's like 45 because they make you, there's like the delivery fee and the extra fee and the tip. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah. You don't want to, and you want to tip these people that they're not making that much money.
Exactly.
So it's like, how do you now, it's a person is driving across town in a 2-ton vehicle to deliver a cheeseburger to you.
Yeah.
How does that make sense? In 2024, it doesn't. And so there are lots of companies that are trying to work on this by doing like things like batch ordering, which is great, but it still isn't super effective because you have a pickup truck delivering a burger. There's such a big disconnect where you're now adding to not only greenhouse gas emissions, the infrastructure strain. If you've ever tried driving in Toronto during rush hour, it's to get from here where we are in Yorkville to downtown, it could be up to half an hour. And we're in the downtown core. And so it's like, that is crazy. And so if we can have something that can kind of offset some of that, eventually maybe even to do our balcony over there, that would be ideal.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So that's what we're building right now.
So how much is the plan to have the drones fully automated, or do you still need a pilot?
So the drones, the way that the regulatory system works is kind of complex. You need initially visual observers to monitor the drone. The plan, and the reason why I mentioned that the regulatory environment is getting really good, is because there's now what's called BVLOS approval with no visual observers, which essentially means the drones can fly beyond visual line of sight. So however far they want within the sort of specifications, usually it's 5 to 25 kilometers, and they can conduct their operations without somebody having to watch it. So a big bottleneck was that you needed an individual watching the drone as it was doing a delivery. So these companies would spend money hiring people to drive their cars to watch the drone as it does a delivery. Huge waste of money, huge waste of time. So we picked the Toronto Islands and places like Nanaimo as well, where it makes sense to do these deliveries because we can still maintain that visual line of sight on the drone, but the drone is fully autonomous completely. So for many years, the drone, the tech has actually arguably almost been there. It's more of been the regulatory environment as well as the battery life. And so as this is getting a lot better, it's opening up these new sort of avenues for things like drone delivery.
And how does it work in terms of, like, for the Toronto Islands, would like a car pick up the food, drive it to the pilot, and then you hook it up and then it goes, or
Depends.
How does that work?
So if say you wanted Italy, we delivered Italy a few times, which is all the way up on Bloor Street.
Yeah, Italy,
a car would pick that up, but we had a strategic location where we had about 10 or 15 restaurants that was in a plaza that we would then have the drone launch out of. And so there's two different models that you can do.
Like a hub and spoke type model, yeah.
And in the earliest days, we did have that where the car would drive to the location to minimize the distance between. But the reality is, for the Toronto Islands, there's no alternatives.
Yeah.
And so it's a perfect solution. People didn't really mind. But in the future, it just, that defeats the purpose. We want to have it where the drone goes from the restaurant to the individual's backyard, lowers it via a winch, and then returns back to the base.
And how often are people ordering from Toronto Islands? Are they like munching down?
Oh, they're munching down. Yeah. It's pretty frequent. I would say, like, on our best days, we're getting like 50 to 60 deliveries in.
Oh, wow.
And so we're at over I think we're at almost 3,000 or 4,000 now. We have to calculate it, go through all the data, but it's each flight that we're doing, we collect a lot of telemetry from video recordings. And so I think our biggest advantage is actually not necessarily what people might think. Like, we're collecting all the data and we're using it to retrain some of the autonomous models on the drone. And that, in our mind, is a huge value add. And it's how we develop a lot of the IP for this.
Okay. Yeah.
Similar to like how Teslas do it, where each car is recording data and it's using that data to train the model so that they're performing better. We're on a much earlier scale than them, but having done several thousand autonomous kilometers already, the models are pretty good. And so that's part, again, being in San Francisco, you have really, really talented researchers who are able to kind of put their coding expertise on a lot of this and do things with computer vision that my limited knowledge is not able to do.
Understood. And this is a question that I'm going to ask you so that now you're able to tell your side of the story here. So you've successfully pitched on Dragon's Den. And as we were talking, you let me know that there was about an hour and a half pitch. And obviously that the way that they filmed it was like very dramatic, very for TV. So can you share your thoughts like right before stepping on stage, the process, and then afterwards?
Yeah, well, they were like, Adriano was supposed to come on with me, actually. Like, he was with me. He's been helping out for years with this. And so he was with me for the whole process, but they cut him out. They were like, no, he can't come in. It's very scripted. It's TV. Mm-hmm. And so I think take everything with a grain of salt there.
So even you like knew the questions beforehand?
No. Scripted in the sense of like, when I did something like I went to the vault to call my dad to talk about the offer, they cut that whole part out. Oh. And so it was very much, okay, everybody stop. And everybody stops. And the dragons all start like going on their phones and like just hanging out. And I'm like, what is going on? They're like, okay, bring the camera and go over here. And it's like, I get it. But it just is, it's very dramatized for no reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're cutting things and reactions. And if you're standing there an hour and a half almost, you're going to make some stumbles. And I think it was a lot of fun for the experience of it. And I think we're super lucky and happy that we got the chance to go on. It's really funny though to see sometimes how they portray things and how they cut and cutting out answers to certain questions. Yeah. Or when I asked Arlene Dickinson a couple questions because she was kind of badgering me hard about some things, and they cut all that part out. And it just, these things are relevant, but again, you kind of give that up when you sign your life away to do this. So we totally understood that. And actually we kind of felt we got off easy. Like we kind of got the best scenario possible, a deal that wasn't really great for us that we were able to reject. And we still got the opportunity to go on and have some of this press. So it was a fantastic opportunity. I just feel lucky to be on. Like I remember growing up watching it, and I think it was exciting for me. I just had a smile for most of the time on, and they were all very, very nice. Like no one was really pushing us that hard. I think even at the end when they're like, oh, you should have taken this deal, it wasn't, there was no dramatic music going on. It was very much more like amicable. Hey, we think you should have taken that. And it's like, well, if I have investors that have put more money in at a better valuation, why am I taking this deal? It's not only going to screw them over, it's going to make me look really bad. Exactly. For giving up a quarter of the company. It just makes no sense. And I think people were giving me flack of like, oh, why would you turn down 300? Adriano was teasing me about it. It's like $300K, you can do a lot. But it's like, you're giving up a ton of control of the company. Exactly. And I remember like, because I watched it prior to this, and I remember like I saw you like doing your thing, and they asked a question, and you had a reaction, but it looked like it was out of place. So clearly, like you said, for an hour and a half they're filming, and they just put that one in. Like they weren't as smooth as they thought with it, because I got like 5 or 6 people being like, "Hey, I could tell they cut it." Yeah. And I was like, yeah, my reaction is not like these are I was ready for all these questions. I felt good about it. And I think they made me look like I had like a deer in the headlights look of like, yeah. Like and it's like, no, it probably just walked in. I zoned. Yeah, exactly. Lights, I had zoned out maybe for a question, or I was thinking about something, and it is what it is. I was very happy with the result actually. And we got hammered by CBC actually on it. They interviewed us because Arlene had called us, a little arrogant in one of the things. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. She said something about that. But it was the context. I'm trying to remember. I haven't watched it in a month. The context was super important. It was because she kind of insinuated it gently, but I was like, no, we're not. And actually Wes had defended us. He said, I don't think you guys are arrogant at all. I think you're confident and you're coming in here. And they made it look like he was really hard on us at the end. Yeah, they did. And so it is what it is. Like, I thought we had done well. I was very like, because we got investment the day before as well. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of gave me this ability to just say no. And to walk away. And to walk away. And that comment, I think, was in response to something I'd said about how other investors had put money in at a better valuation. So it was the type of thing where it just didn't make any sense. But they did, they did make it feel a little bit like you were like, hey, they did this before. Oh yeah. But yeah. But it is what it is. The only other thing about that was I think Arlene was saying something about how I had mentioned we had gotten more traction than other companies who had raised more money and we hadn't raised, and they had cut that part out. And they had just made it look like, oh, I had said we're like those companies, we could raise a ton of money. And she's like, oh, well, they will fail. And it's like, yes, companies that raise hundreds of millions can also fail, but we have raised $0 before that point when we launched, and we succeeded more than those companies did. So I thought that had mattered, but it's the type of thing, sometimes it gets lost on them too, and you don't want to have to explain it over and over. They interrupt you constantly.
Of course.
So you can't really finish the thought. And I was told as well to not kind of try to go back or don't talk over them. So just stop talking when they interrupt you and let them go with it.
And so they say a lot of like all these shows, there's like what the Shark Tank effect, the Dragon's Den effect did you experience some of that?
Definitely. We monitored analytics on our website. It spiked like crazy on the first night. It wasn't as much as you might think though, because the viewership, like it's cable TV. You don't have that many people who are kind of, it's not like a big Netflix premiere where you can see the viewers. And so we kind of didn't really know what to expect. It's all estimates. It's like trying to gauge who's listening in on radio. How do you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of the times the networks don't share the numbers, especially when they're not really great. And so we had a ton of traffic on our website. We have like a sign up list to download what product that we're working on the app. We had a lot of sort of this suite ready. And it definitely got a ton of traffic from that, but it wasn't actually as much as I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting to kind of see how that
it could also be like
reacts.
Because if you had a physical product, people would be buying right away. But because it's more of like the idea, it's the press aspect of it.
And I think that's why we got on, because we were a little different. A lot of companies are trying to sell something. So we went on there to raise money, which is the whole point of the show. Mm-hmm. And so I think they liked that because we were genuinely trying to. I had a really
some
fair
companies
ask. They don't actually want it. So they'll go on there, they'll do some crazy valuation just to get rejected just because they want the press. But
that makes sense. Was there ever a point, because this seems like they said on the show, like you were competing with Amazon. This is a very like new space. Was there ever a point where you considered giving up? And if so, like what kept you going?
Yeah, definitely. Multiple times. I think we almost got in the end of 2022, we got an acqui-hire offer. It was a really shitty like buyout, and I would have then become an employee of that company. Mm-hmm. And I think if the salary was higher, I might have taken it, because this was, I mentioned it on, I think we talked about it a little bit, where I launched in 2022 from pretty much September of 2022 all the way until end of April. We had very little sort of outward progress. We were working on things internally, but we had no investors. We had no press. We had no like real publicity. Like we had employees, so I was burning through my cash trying to keep everybody going, and we got nothing. We got no validation. And so this could have been something like a great lesson for me on how to kind of project and launch now.
Yeah.
But during that time frame, I think many times I was like, oh, is this really going to work? Should I be doing this? And then kind of like a wave, it just all started coming. And now we've gotten like over a dozen articles written about us on like BlogTO, Globe and Mail, CBC, CTV. And so it's like, those are really positive things to help push us forward. So now I don't feel like it as much, but definitely like a year ago, I definitely felt like it.
It almost feels like, because I've experienced this too. And I don't know if this is an entrepreneurial effect or whatever, but I always tie it into spirituality. My thing is like, it's like, there's always going to be a test. Like, do you really want this?
Yeah.
And it's just when you push through that, that's when everything starts happening. There's a wave.
There's always going to be like that.
There's
I
always
agree.
gonna
Yeah.
be. So running a startup is obviously a roller coaster. How do you maintain mental resilience during these lows and stay grounded during the highs?
Definitely family, I think, is the most important part. And then working out, to be honest, has been really, really helpful. Of like, ensuring that kind of my emotions and hormones are all regulated through eating well, working out, sleeping well, and then just prioritizing family time. I think during the summers of 2022, I was living with my grandparents. Like, I didn't have a place of my own. I guess Adriano's was kind of a thing, but it wasn't really, because they were selling the place. Yeah. And so I was taking care of my grandparents while also commuting downtown to the islands. And it was the most work I've ever done, but it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done as well. Because you get to kind of realign your values from going out to Mod Club and spending a lot of time with friends, living by yourself at Queens, to spending time with your grandparents. It really reset that kind of sort of values that I knew I wanted to align with, but it just like even if I didn't really believe it at first, I was like, oh, like being surrounded by kind of your grandparents, I'm not really going to grow or learn that much. Like I'd way rather be downtown out networking with people at a bar, whatever that means. But in fact, it actually is like my grandpa was a businessman for like 60 years.
Yeah.
And so he has this wealth of experience to be able to not only challenge me, but give me his perspective. He came to calls with me. He would analyze proposals with me. So it just, things like that are really good at aligning my values of where they are and where they want to be. And then even just like kind of just doing it over time, you transition into that model. And so now it's like living with my sister now, and it's fantastic. It just is, spending time with family is the most important thing.
I totally agree with you, which is actually why like this year, one of my goals is I'll have dinner with them which is funny how our values like start aligning on once. So I really make an effort to do that. But what I think is really interesting is like, before I used to have all this fear about like, oh, AI might take what I'm doing and all this kind of stuff. But then I realized like, if you just focus on the principles, which I'm tying it back to what you said about your grandfather, business has principles. Like you need to promote, but the only thing that changes is like the channels. You still have to promote, except maybe they had newspaper, maybe they had radio. We just have different channels. So like fundamental principles like promotion, attraction, good literacy with your finances, all that stuff is almost the same, and you could pick that up from with your family or with your grandfather who's in business, right? And and that's so interesting because like if you live, I find that I use emotions to gauge like how much I'm living or not living my values. So I have this awareness around it. If I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling really upset, I tend to ask myself, okay, am I living with my values? And almost every single time it's no. And every time I'm living aligned with them, my emotions are positive. So I think one of the most important things an entrepreneur should develop is a relationship with their emotions. Because instead of, a lot of people I think, and you've probably seen this in Queens, you've probably seen this maybe, a lot of people drown out their emotions or eat their emotions away instead of using them as like a compass, which is what I think what they kind of are.
Yeah, I think like, absolutely. I think just, it sounds sort of silly, but like when you're younger, and this is like a year and a half ago, which is not really that long ago, but I think the growth that I've experienced over that time frame has been so significant that living more true to kind of the values that you want to be and kind of acting on it. It's easy to kind of say, hey, I'd like to be like this. I want to be a family guy. But it's really true. Once you kind of start living like that, it's amazing how, not only how people respect it and they kind of try to accommodate you, not only friends, partners, whatever, you are happier. Like you're spending time with people that you love. And even if there's friction, a lot of people have friction with their family. It's like the act of doing, like pushing through that instead of avoiding it is beneficial for you both. And a lot of the times it's like I had friction with my dad sometimes because we're so similar. And so it's like, if you can get past that and celebrate, I'm a clone of you. That's really special. And it's like, that is something you can bond over instead of like, oh, we irritate each other because we're both strong-willed. We like to talk a lot. We talk over each other. We get like these things are normal and everybody faces it. But it's just something that like, I know very few people who have a perfect relationship. I think the happiest people are the ones who prioritize it. And it's like, I think living as well with my grandpa, I'm like, what makes him happy? And the only thing he's thinking about is like his kids, his grandkids. And so it's like, that's it. That's so important.
And this is something that I have a strike like this. I totally believe like when you're older, that's what's going to be what matters. You're going to want the kids. You're going to want that, or else you're going to get lonely. And I think right now, we're seeing the rise of like dinks.
Yeah.
I understand. Like I get it, right? Dual income, have fun. But in the end, it's like, is it really worth it?
I don't know. I think, you know what it is that is like kind of hilarious? Because I went to Queens, like, and especially even LHS was like, we were having fun. There's a big social aspect to it. I think a lot of people didn't have that. And I think that's something that sometimes people say, once you get older, you have a little bit more discretionary income. You can go on those crazy vacations. You can party around. I see it a lot in San Francisco, actually. These really smart engineers who had been like, just studying their whole undergrad. They now graduate, get an amazing tech job. They're making a ton of money. And then now they're all partying and doing drugs. And you're like, why? I'm like, why? Like, this is the time when you could be like growing so much. But it's like, instead, I think it's like you're saying, man, it's like, it just depends. Like everyone has a different preference, and I don't want to hate on anybody's preference, but I just like, I want a big family. And I think it's so special.
I want like 5 tank. Like me too. I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I had that phase like the partying, the going out. I had that in high school, university, and now I'm past it. But it's like some people just never had that. They never had that. So now, unfortunately, they're using their like most valuable 20s to have that phase. There's nothing wrong with it.
And because we did it, it's so hard to be hypocritical to be like, you guys shouldn't do this.
Exactly.
But it's like at the same time going through that and seeing it on the other side, we're like our parents, which is so funny when they look at us like, come on guys, don't stay up till 4 a.m. partying. And we're like, what do you got? Like, whatever, I'm gonna be home late. Yeah, I like try to come home early, and it's like how many times I broke curfew, or I mean like that's just the dumb stuff that now I can understand it. I empathize with my parents more, but it's so interesting because people have to live it for themselves.
Yeah.
And they have to do it for themselves. And that's even tying back to business. You have to kind of just do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could plan all the I wanted about drone delivery. I could try to go pitch a bunch of VCs or angels, but me actually doing it and going to them and saying, we've done this many deliveries. We have this much IP. Like that is what matters.
Exactly. Just getting into it, like, because it could be very practical. Okay, what do I need? A drone and some food. Yeah. There's the proof of concept, like literally, right? And it's not that simple, but I'm saying practicality. That's because some people, here's something that I totally believe. And this is actually, I learned this from the controversial man of all his wisdom, Andrew Tate. And he's like, don't get legal until you get rich.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, don't worry. Like a lot of people worry about accounting, setting up all the legal process. They don't even have a single dollar in. You did the exact opposite. You found the thing, you had the money, like you knew the money was coming in. Then you figured out all the other stuff. Right.
I probably shouldn't have incorporated yet, but there was for the regulatory stuff. It was so much like to get insurance, you needed a corporation. Yeah. I probably could have gotten insurance, but the one that I liked that was super cheap, I needed a corporation and a business number. So I just did it super quick. And there were all these services that were trying to pitch you, and it's like, just do it yourself. Go out. It's $200. Just, you don't even need to worry about filing. And then even the thing about taxes too, on the early stage, it's like, I think I just use an accountant that was super cheap. You don't have to worry about it that much. Everyone thinks it's so complicated. It's like, you don't have to do it all. And it's like, it encourages you to make money. Like these deadlines are good. They help you.
Exactly.
And small businesses in Canada have so much going for them. Like you can write off so much stuff.
I know. Yeah.
That is so underrated. Laptops, phones, phone plans, internets, meals, even to an extent. It's like, there's so much that you can do that is so great that you don't have to just get hammered with taxes. I just posted on LinkedIn about this. There's taxes on everything now.
I saw that, yeah. So we have about 6 minutes left before end of part 1. So I want to finish off with this one question. How would you go about, so you have a team, you have some people working for you. So I'm wondering, how do you foster a culture of trust and open communication within your team?
Good question. I think the first thing is something I just read Elon Musk's new book, which the author did such a good job on it that he didn't portray him like it wasn't kind of brown nosing to Elon. Like Elon is like Steve Jobs. Like these people are not really pleasant people to work for.
I bet not.
Like they're kind of assholes, and that's okay because you kind of want for what some of these people are doing. If you want a guy going to Mars, you kind of want him to be an asshole.
You want the guy to be like, I can do it, and you better do what I say. Like you're not if someone's flying a plane, you don't have like, oh yeah, absolutely. I can do it. You want someone like, yeah, I can do it. So
it's like, but I do not, first off, I did not sell PayPal and have a $300 million buyout. I cannot compare myself, and I won't compare myself to be like, oh, I should be like Elon. It's like, if I treated my employees like he treated his employees, they would all leave.
Yep.
And so it's like, there's context to be important where it's okay to kind of be aspirational, but you also have to be down to earth and realistic. And so I think the most important thing that I took from what he did, though, he always was hands-on with them. He was always in the trenches with them. He was never saying, stay late while I go home to like my jets and party and stuff. He didn't do that. And so that was a really good example of like, he put his money where his mouth is, and he was doing the work with the employees. And so not only giving equity to the employees, which is what we're doing, but also working with them and not ever expecting something you wouldn't do yourself, and consistently doing more so that you're inspiring them.
You're giving equity to your employees?
We do. Yeah.
This is something that I am looking into because I want to, Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives, I'll show you the work, or something like this. So how are you going about this? How does this work?
So there are things called vesting. So what you should do.
Phantom shares.
No. It's called vesting. And so essentially when you incorporate, this is what all my lawyers do a lot of this, so forgive me if I get some of it wrong, but you'll essentially incorporate a company, issue a certain number of shares. Issue a certain number of shares, and then from that shares, you will create a pool of shares. So maybe it's like 10 or 15%, which is standard. That's called the ESOP, employee stock option pool. And so as you grow, especially as you raise money, use these shares to incentivize people. So early employees can get lots and lots of those shares. And the later on you get, the fewer the shares are given out because the more that they're worth. And so the way that you kind of retain talent, when you talk about like, you'll hear people at companies like Shopify be like, oh, I have like these options, or Meta or Google or whatever. They're talking about essentially they have periods of time. The longer they're with a company, the more shares they unlock, and then they can then sell. Oh. And so in early stage companies, the shares are pretty much worthless. It's like there's no liquidity. Nobody's knocking on my door with the exception of a couple people to buy a bunch of different shares. We're too early stage for that. And so the reality is the shares aren't really worth much. But on paper, when I raise a round at 8 million USD and I'm giving out equity, that's on paper, like that's value, that's real value that these people could potentially unlock in the future. And even if that likelihood is low, and especially because that likelihood is low, that's why you want to share it with your employees. And so this is the mindset of like, it's okay to be a solo founder as long as you're surrounding yourself with a team of people who are incentivized to do the work. And I think that's the most important part of what I'm trying to iterate of like, I'm working hard with them. We have daily stand-ups as well, keeping them accountable. If you let things slide, it's a negative impact because people are seeing other people's performance. And if somebody does something wrong and you aren't saying, hey, I'd like to give you some feedback on why this didn't go super well, a call or a document that they've prepared, you are encouraging them to perform better. And then again, letting people go if it's not working out, that's the hardest thing on a small team. You get emotionally attached to people.
100%.
But these are not your friends. These are not your family. Everyone's here to do a job. And if you stop paying people, most of the people are going to stop working. So there are very few people who are going to stick around. And it's okay to acknowledge that this is the business. The goal is to make money. That's all right. It's also a part of this is to kind of change an industry, but it's okay. Like investors who give you money, most of the investors just say, I want to make a ton of money off of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what they want. That's okay to acknowledge. Exactly it's not like a bad thing. Like I of course want to make money and give the investors their money back 100-fold, but it's also like in doing so, you can do it in a way that not only is ethical, but also encourages the team to be there and encourages a good dynamic. And when you're generous with people, it pays dividends.
And this is, so this is something I have to discuss because like I'm looking for these incentive structures as well. So I got to talk about this. So it's 2:00 right now. So I think let's cut it off for here. And then Sounds maybe good. We take our calls and maybe we'll do part 2 because I still. Welcome back everyone to the part 2 of the Cameron Rowe Hover Talent Talks podcast. As you guys have been able to tell, there's some technical difficulties. This is probably why you've only seen my face for the first 5 minutes of the other podcast. Unfortunately, forgot that one of the cameras wasn't able to film or wasn't able to when it locks, it films. So now we figured it out. Now it's all good. So always listen to your intuition. I shouldn't have done it, but here we go. So we're just going to go off and jump right into it, right where we left off before. I'm pretty sure we left off as... Yeah, okay, here we go, which I'm just going to see, where did we leave off? Okay, here we go. So we left off talking about like how did you go about fostering a culture of trust and open communication with your team, which I think you answered. So I think the next question I had was, what role has mentorship played in your career and how do you mentor others if you do?
That is a good one. I definitely think mentorship has been a pretty significant role for pretty much every step of the way. I think it's from the initial, the first mentor, as I mentioned, that had first introduced me to the commercial real estate agent because he knew I was working on drones. It's not that there's one big massive thing that they do. It's just being there. It's being available for questions. It's them reaching out and taking initiative versus you, the mentee, having to always do it. And so it's having a presence that's known, and almost in that circumstance, I think it's okay to almost be more of a friend, to just be there. Mm-hmm. And I think all the best mentors that I've had, I've really liked on a personal level. And so that's been a really significant thing for me I have mentors, but they sort of naturally form. I think in a program that we did Techstars over the summer, which was fantastic, they forced us to do something called Mentor Madness. And for 3 weeks, all day long, all we would do for 8 hours a day was to have mentor calls. So we would do 2 an hour. We did pretty much, I think, 14 calls a day. They were half an hour long for total of 15 to 20 days. And so in doing so, you end up chatting with so many different types of people. And in our case, it was like 50, 60, 70 different people for half an hour, which is a super long time when you think about it.
How did that work? How did you?
So it was so time consuming. The way that Techstars is focused is it's assumed that you have a team. So it's not as though you're the only one who does work. It's that they're setting up these calls for you. So they're scheduling calls for you so that you take them, and in hopes of getting potential investors.
So do you want to just move the core a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Getting potential investors, getting potential partners, introducing them to people in their network. And the way that Techstars works is that a mentor who gets chosen to do these things gets equity in all of the companies. It's almost pooled, kind of like the stock option that I mentioned to you. And so it incentivizes, not only, in this case, the mentors are incentivized. And so that was really great for us because they really want us to succeed. But most of my successful ones actually are just people that I had met along the way that you connect with, and people that random little occurrences happen that you end up reaching out, and they have, oh, hey, do you want to help out at this event? And then you go spend time with them. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wow, a lot of people want to be talking with this person, and I have an hour or two alone with them. And those are the types of things of like, you also have to look for people who are receptive. And so that's, some people just don't want to give you their time. Like some people I'll text, won't respond to me. And so it's kind of like, it's not that they don't like you or they don't want you to succeed. It just is that they are probably busy themselves doing. The best mentors are doing the things themselves.
Exactly.
And so you have to be empathetic of that, of like, they're you, but further ahead. And can you imagine if I'm busy now, how somebody further ahead of me would be busy? So it's like, being empathetic and being human, of like, you don't like, this person doesn't have to respond to you. They don't owe you anything. And so when people do that, showing gratitude as well and being really authentic, it's so crucial to be a nice person. People want to spend time with you. They want to help you. They'll give you money. And it just is so crucial to build those connections that are more almost friendships initially, but at the same time with that undertone of like, they know what you're doing. They know if you need help, and things just start to develop. So it's a bit of a skill to be able to do it, but it's something that I think the more that you practice it, the better you get. And then all of a sudden you end up a couple years in and you say, oh, wow, I have this really amazing roster of people I can call for help.
And what do you consider like a mentor? Because I've always known that it's good to get a mentor. I understand the concept of get someone a few years ahead of you, but it never really sunk in for me. Like, what does that look like? Is that like, what does a mentorship look like? Is it like weekly calls, like you said? Is it texting? Or like, how does it specifically, what's the practicality of it?
It can be all of the above. And
did you pay for any of these, or this is all like organic?
Techstars you kind of do pay for because you give up equity to be in the program. So in a way you're paying for it. Some of the advisors that I have, I give equity to, or I pay, but those are different. So in terms of the mentors of like on a personal level, I would say that those don't always have to be directly in what you're doing a couple of years ahead. It can be people kind of tangentially doing things. So like if there's a successful entrepreneur in accounting, for example, and you're in like health tech, those don't really relate, but there are parallels between them, and you could still have this person as your mentor. And so I think the beautiful part is that I don't necessarily just have one, and different sections of my life will have more importance on one or the other. So like at the beginning, the one who was in Kingston, shout out Dan Desjardins. He's a really great guy. He runs a company there. He was helpful in the early stages, but I'm not in Kingston anymore. And so we'll catch up and check in with one another, but it just is the type of thing where these relationships evolve and grow. And so it's like now I almost, not that we're an equal, but I almost view him more as a friend than somebody that I would call and ask for help with things. So back in 2018, he definitely was someone I would call and ask for help. And so there's no real right answer. It could even be a parent, could be a mentor. It could be a friend. It could be someone younger than you. It doesn't really have to be more experienced. But the reason that people say that of like try to find someone is because many times when you message people, hey, do you want to grab coffee? Many times people will say yes to that. And it's like, these are very small things. You just have to make it easy for them to say yes. But it's also like, if you ask Elon Musk, hey, can we have coffee? He's going to say no. He's not even going to respond. Even if you did get to talk to him in person, he's going to laugh. I mean, maybe he'd say yes. But it's the type of thing, they're so busy that you have to also understand your audience of like, some people just can't give you that. And so you still have to be flexible of like, you can get different things from different people, and some of it will overlap, some of it won't. And so I think that's why it's important to have a big network, as we were mentioning. the bigger the network you have, the more experiences collectively everyone in that network has. And the more that you guys are amicable and that like one another and you're doing socials together, the more that gets shared. Mm-hmm. So that's why part of what I've been working on now is called Fresh Founders. And that's having events with founders that isn't about, it's kind of a networking event, but it's not the shitty networking event where you have to, oh, hello, how are you? Oh, Paul, I'm Cameron. Oh, this is what I'm working on. It's like, oh man, like today kind of sucked. I had to fire somebody. We're running out of money. I don't know what to do. I had to like, these are the real conversations that it's kind of like, we're not putting any spin on it.
Yeah.
So those are more peers, but they can also be mentors too, because many of them are going to be further ahead. So there's no right answer to it, but it's finding people that you can learn from. And in the same way what we were chatting about with housing, of like, I'm trying to pick people to live with now in San Francisco. And I want those people to be not only peers, but people that I can talk to and that I can relate to, and they can be mentors in situations for me. So it's also good to have the distinction. There's no clear answer essentially.
And were you actively looking for mentors, or was it kind of like along your journey, the people kind of appeared and you thought, hey, this will be an interesting person?
Along the journey, definitely. I think at certain times, of course, as I mentioned, the Techstars thing, I was actively looking for mentors, but it's along the journey people come up. And it's just, you have calls with somebody, you do a good thing as well, which is like put something in the calendar. Or a good thing that I try to do is, do you know of any other people in your network that I might benefit from chatting with?
Okay, that's a Wajhat. Remember to remind me of that when you're editing this. I'm going to put it here. That's a really good one, because I always ask for referrals, but I never ask, hey, do you know anyone else in your network?
And it's a soft question. It's not like, hey, can you book another time? Like that one's good, especially if we're talking about deliverables or there is an action item to be discussed. But if you're having coffee with somebody, how do you, like, you're not going to immediately go, okay, can you invest in me? Yeah. Maybe they will. But wait, the way that you frame it is like, I am looking to invest. Can I practice pitching to you? Mm-hmm. It's like, you have to do things in a subtle way. Yeah. You have to do things you almost have to like lead people to an outcome, but you can't force them to do the outcome. So if you're looking to get money and you want a famous investor or a successful entrepreneur to invest in you, you may be able to get them to invest by just saying, hey, can you invest in me? But probably not. It's probably better to say, hey, can you give me some feedback on the pitch? Or I'd love to buy you a coffee and chat about X, Y, and Z that I saw you're working on. There's ways to do it. And then on that chat, you can say, hey, if they're going to inevitably ask, hey, what are you working on? And that's where you have an opening to say. It's like, if they're not asking, they probably don't care either. So that's the other thing of like, you have to create situations that are favorable to you. So having a discussion, hey, can we have a 20-minute call? You know, I used to do that of like super quick. And then on those calls, you can say, this is what I'm looking for. Sometimes you can be straightforward. So some investors, especially VCs, will want that of like, I'm looking to invest. Here are my terms. Here's my deck. But at the same time, it's also good to have a relationship. So it's okay to kind of have that introduction initially where you kind of say, hey, really quickly, this is what I'm working on. How's it going? There are ways to do it that it's subtle and under the radar. And this isn't something that it's kind of an art more than a science.
That totally makes sense. And when you were looking for these mentors, like what do you think that they played a very crucial role in your development and in your success? Or do you think, or how do you like gauge their value? Definitely
Crucial role for sure. An intro from a mentor got us with a popular entrepreneur in San Francisco, and that entrepreneur we made like a really good friendship with initially. Didn't ask about raising money, just sort of said, hey, would love some feedback on the deck, would love to chat with you. We're thinking about coming and now living and operating out of San Francisco. Would love some opinions on good areas to go. Do you know any people looking for housing? And that spiraled from there. He invited me to come to Thanksgiving at his place, the American Thanksgiving in November, and now I'm hopefully going to be renting a place with one of his buddies. So it's like these things start to spiral and you can't really foresee where it takes you, but it's just that initial catalyst was the mentor doing that.
It sounds that being in the environment where these networks are like more concentrated is a lot better. Like I'm finding in Toronto, there are entrepreneurs, but they're a lot more spaced out. There's not like you can still meet people at coffee shops, or maybe you'll meet someone through a person, but it's not like the nodes aren't as close together, right? Which is making me realize maybe I need to go to the States if I'm going to do this kind of stuff. Seriously, I need to go to New York. I need to go to
Toronto does have a good tech culture. It also depends because, as I mentioned to you offline when we were having lunch in between part 1 and part 2, I was a part of all these different sort of incubators and groups that helped me build a network. when you're a part of those, your friends inevitably just become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And that is super valuable for you personally to be surrounded by that. But you're right, because you have a lot of other, like if we grew up in the city, we have a lot of other friends intermixed. And so that's why for me going to SF is so cool, because I can pick the people I hang out with. I'm not getting my old high school friend asking to hang out to go to an old high school party. I'm going to a party full of other entrepreneurs, and it doesn't really matter what you're working on. It just is, when you're immersed in it, whether you're an artist or an athlete or whatever, you have that compounding network effect.
Yeah. And it's almost like you just have to get yourself in the room. Like once you're in the room, then it's everything kind of
just being
falls.
there. Yeah. Because most people won't go. They'll want to do a call. And so that, like, you do stand out. If you say, I'll fly, I'm in Canada, but I'll fly and have coffee with you, you would probably get a lot of people to be like, oh, damn. Some people would say, no, don't. And there is a line. This is what I actually have learned. Sometimes it's okay to not do too much. It's okay to just do a call online and see if it's good and then go in person. But at the same time, it might work out way better if you're in person. So it's like, how do you have to, that's a value judgment of like income and free time. And it's like, you have to kind of make that call and then stick to it. And that's a really cool part about just doing your own thing, is that you get to make these judgment calls. There's no clear right answer. Sometimes you'll never know if it was a right or wrong decision, but you have to more rely on gut. And it's like, if it's a good call, you'll find out soon enough. If not, you'll also find out. So it's like, then you kind of slowly shift course based on the factors that you're getting and feedback from it.
And in the same vein of, say, mentorship, how do you approach like learning independently through like YouTube videos or books? Which is the best way that you personally learn that has resulted in like the biggest ROI for you?
Reading and probably taking calls with people I wouldn't normally accept. But also
give us an example. Like, what do you mean people you wouldn't normally accept?
So as you start to get busier and you're like, so for instance, we have to do a lot of test flights with the drones.
Yep.
So I could be spending all day, every day doing test flights, but obviously you have to do some of the administrative work. You have to pay taxes. You have to organize calls. You have to set investor meetings. You have to book flights. And that's actually funny enough where a VA might actually be super helpful with some of that.
Yeah.
But we just got outreach from a professor at a university who's working with a commercial real estate firm to develop properties for drone deliveries. Initially, when he reached out, he did not mention anything about the commercial part. He just said, hey, I'm interested in drone deliveries. And so it's like, it's very easy to just not take a call with somebody because it doesn't really, why do I need to talk to a university professor? He's not like it doesn't really apply. But then I was like, okay, we'll do like a 20-minute call. And then on the call, he's like, oh yeah, we have like a group working with us where it's going to be part of like students are going to be working on it as a project, but also it's going to be, we're selling, like there's so much that's going on where he's like, oh wow, this is actually a fantastic fit.
And this is how this is when I tie it back into like the spirituality and the emotionality of, say, entrepreneurship, because it's almost like if a person reaches out to me, the way that I see it, it's like there's a reason they're reaching out to you. Like something is matching, something must have had them to reach out. So the ability to like take those calls is like a bit of an awareness of like how it all works.
So I was wrong in that.
Yeah.
My gut had said waste of time. And you have to, what we're told by everybody, and this is a very important thing, be very like special about you. You cannot do everything all at once. Yep. You will kill yourself. There's 100 things that I have on my to-do list that I would never get any flights done, any test flights done if I just sat down and just did those things. And sometimes I go one way too far. So it's about finding that balance. And sometimes it's going too far in the other ways and correcting. And so you're constantly making these course corrections. And so it like, the reality is though, saying yes more than you think you can will expand your breadth. And it's like, how often are we spending time scrolling or watching Netflix? It's like I can sacrifice 20 minutes of that to take a call with someone who's reached out and who is interested. So it's like, that is also kind of the life of it. You end up, your life gets a little consumed by it. Mm-hmm. And so you do have to have those times where you can log off and do it. So for me, it's working out or making dinners or like sleeping. I really prioritize sleep. But sometimes I've messed up on that. Sometimes I'll do great. Like now, like I'll have a call after this with the university professor. So
I think two things you said that I want to circle back to. So I like what you really said about course corrections, because it's almost like if you're driving a car and you're going to like Toronto or Mississauga, like you make these tiny little course corrections along the way, but to be able to do that, you do have to have the end in mind. So I'm interested, like, do you have an end in mind for Hover? What is like your vision that you're being pulled towards? Do you begin with the end in mind?
A bit of that, yeah. I definitely think there definitely is a bit of having a vision and working backwards, but you also can't forget that you need to validate the problem that you're trying to solve. So just because I think it's really cool that drone delivery would solve all these problems doesn't mean that other people would pay for it or that it's something that could reasonably happen in the next 20 years. And so that's where we said, I need to just do it and test. And so...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Can you go more into about validating the problem? Because I went through this process with my hats. Like I validated the need, but I almost forced it. I just like put the money in, found like the numbers did work out, but I don't know if it was the right way. So I want to know, like, what did you learn about validation? How do you validate a problem?
It's funny you say force it, because you could, like, there's all of this advice out there. Some of it is like, oh, sometimes you have to like fucking force something in to make it a reality. Other things are like, oh, you have to let things flow organically. And it's like, I actually definitely think forcing it is something you need to do initially, of like, you need to push past people's concerns about drones flying. It's like, hey, this is going to happen. We got all the regulations. We understand that it isn't something that you're too familiar with. This was some feedback that we had gotten of like, we don't like the idea of drones flying. So we made sure we did testing, we did public consultations. There's ways to mitigate those. So initially it seems like forcing it, when in reality, it's just you're facing rejection or you're facing difficult things. And it's like, you're still finding ways to achieve the goal while understanding that there are roadblocks ahead. Mm-hmm. And so validating the problem, there are certain points in which it should be easier.
Do you have a framework?
Not really. I think that...
And what do you define as a problem?
If I've experienced. So it's like... a problem I'll have noticed is like, I scratch all my phones. So that's a clear problem. I need a phone case. Okay, great. Now I go look for a phone case. That's a clear driven problem. We were just talking about delivery, how annoying it is that the lady who delivered it, we have to
this is exactly what I was actually going to circle back.
$15, which is like 15% if I'm doing $100 order, but it's like, it's snowing outside. I'm like, this girl's working hard. Her scooter died. She has to go charge it. I'm like, I'm gonna tip her, but now it's like for 2 meals. That's what it was.
But I think what's like why I personally think like what you have something here is because even when I was thinking about this, I felt like you just did it, and I was like, oh, but like that's a problem. That's a profitable problem.
It can be small things too.
Yeah,
it can be stuff of like, oh, like storing your photos on your computer suck. So it's like, how can we now integrate it so it's on the cloud? And it's like, oh, well, Box exists, iCloud exists, all of these storage solutions exist. That's a clear problem. The problem is, like, you don't want to get into a situation in which you're making something that nobody wants. But the problem is, when you're early stage, nobody wants what you've made.
Exactly.
So that's why it's so important to ship things and ship things fast and rapidly. And I think if I were to do it again, I think I would actually ship a more imperfect product.
And explain more towards that, because I have some thoughts on this as well. So explain a little bit more about that.
We probably are parroting some of the stuff that we've heard from other people talk about it, but it's like
the MVP, like MVP, right?
MVP, yeah. And so like, we were originally going to do an app. I scrapped it because it would have been like 20 grand, and I wanted to make it like a really nice UI, like super sleek and sexy. Then you got to get it through the iOS store, then there's the Google Play Store, and it's like, fuck that. Let's just do a text bot. And this was way before, like 6 months before ChatGPT. So I personally had to code each interaction with this bot. And so text wasn't the best, but it's like, it's fine for now. Like it's totally fine. And it's just having these things that don't scale or that aren't great at first to demonstrate, because if people use a system that isn't that great, when you make it better, more people are definitely going to use it. And so the key here is also to get rid of friction, to make it easy for your customers to use it. If I have to download an app, create an account, upload my credit card, that's kind of a lot of work.
It is.
But if I can just text somebody and it says, oh, tap here on your Apple Pay on your phone, double click, scan your face, and you're good to go.
It's so simple.
Way easier.
And
then I just text you a link. I can text you, and even what we were toying with, originally I was like, oh, I'm going to have a video feed from the drone streaming to a server that you can then watch as your order is delivered. Super sick, right? Like, oh my God, that's so cool. Does that really move the needle? No. Mm-hmm. It's like, could a Domino's tracker style thing do the same result? Yes. And way, way less expensive and way less effort. So it's like, I think I probably wouldn't have even done that. I probably just would have launched it without anything, with like the bare minimum of like, hey, it costs $10, or even not without any of the texting servers. Just go there one day with the drone, fly it around. Hey, I'll deliver stuff. And it's like, that would give me enough traction to then say, I'm going to go spend the money to do it. And so in many ways, I kind of got lucky. but you want it to be as organic as possible. And the problem is it's also not always clear, because some days we had almost nobody order and the other days we had tons of people order. So it's like you just have to look at averages, and you can't take the super high and super low results and make that like indicative of something. So,
and in terms of like MVP, like you built it, but it's not like you're surveying people or you're seeing that problem, because I find that like people just tell you, they'll just say something, but it's a difference between dollars down and
surveys don't mean shit. Surveys are good for like when you're in business school in first year, and it's like, oh, hey, how can we, like, it doesn't really mean anything, because it's like the only people filling it out are like, oh, can you please fill it out? And you're like, do I really have to fill out this 5-minute survey? Are you fucking kidding? And I'll just like, sometimes I will click through surveys super quick, barely reading it. So it's like, how valuable is that actually going to be? And it's like not going to be valuable at all.
Exactly.
So it is better to just launch. And this is the importance of your personal network. And it goes back to what we were talking about, a distribution. It's if you have a good distribution chain. So like I have like 8 or 9K on LinkedIn right now. I can share projects that I'm working on, like the drone delivery, on my LinkedIn, and I will get 10,000 views, 20,000 views if it's well worded, if I do all the hooks for LinkedIn. And it's like, if you have nobody on LinkedIn, it's much harder to do that, but there are ways that you can still do it within a school, within a workplace environment, within your friends and family. And it's like, you have this credibility that people will try things. You do need to get it into the hand of people who will give you the brutally honest feedback, and strangers help a ton. There's Reddit now, there's Product Hunt, there's even just TikTok. Any consumer product, just go make 10 TikTok videos about your product in a way. Just Google how to make a TikTok video about a product go viral. And if you make 10 of them, you're doing more than most people ever would. And you're going to get people commenting, random people, oh, cool idea, or like, don't do crap. This, it's bad. Yeah. And so you'll get, either way, you can then integrate links, and then you can monitor the analytics on links, all for free, by the way. So it's like, you can do things so easily.
Like links back to the site?
Yeah. You can create you can create a free website, or even a product. Go on, like, whatever you're working on, of like that. We saw a cool product that you had a call with earlier, of like, viral marketing is huge for something like that. Yeah. One viral video can change the direction of a company. Oh, and so it's like, even those random car dealerships that are now having the interns that are going viral on TikTok. Like, that's great. If I lived in that area, I would want to go to that store. So doing things like that, it's like, the reality is you also have to be patient. And it's like, things will not work immediately. As I mentioned, it took a year before I got really any feedback on the drone delivery stuff. And I look back now and I would do some things differently, but it also is a factor of time. It's like, if I had given up or stopped, we wouldn't be here now, and I wouldn't be in SF, and we wouldn't have raised as much as we did. So there's a lot of different factors involved with it. There's not one right answer. You kind of have to trust yourself and develop those instincts. And
I think in terms of entrepreneurship too, the most important decision an entrepreneur can make, and I want you to comment on this, is going down the road of entrepreneurship. Because what I find is, like, I used to have a corporate job, and having the mentality of a corporate job is completely different than the mentality of entrepreneurship. But in entrepreneurship, it doesn't matter how slow you go, as long as you just don't stop.
Yeah.
And like, and I think a lot of people, from what I heard, the way that I see it perceived, Alex Hormozy talks about this a lot. He's like, so first entrepreneurs see, like, there's uninformed optimism. They don't know what they're getting into. Then they get into the opportunity. Then they get into informed pessimism, and they're like, "Oh my God, this sucks." And then because they want that high back up, they'll switch opportunities they'll switch into whatever, dropshipping, whatever it is. I've been guilty of this. So how did you have this valley of despair moment? Did you have, because like, I'm assuming delivery drones, obviously get a drone. Like, it seems like a good idea, but then when you actually got into a nitty-gritty, how did you go past that valley of despair?
I mean, I was in there for a while, so you kind of just have to be doing a lot. And so the saying of like, if you take your foot off the gas, you go backwards, is super accurate.
I've never heard this.
Well,
it's big in the
I'm saying it, Cameron Rowe.
Yeah, Cameron Rowe. Cameron Rowe.
It's so true. It's like, if you stop, because it doesn't really matter what you do. It could be waking up and doing work on the website, but it's like, the reason that people love being in San Francisco is because it like condenses everything. You have the ability to do more with less. But at the same time, in terms of we're talking about with progress, it's like, you kind of just have to push through. There isn't really like a sexy way to do it. It's ensuring you're getting enough sleep, you're eating well, you have a good support system. It's like, very little would change in my personal life if Hover ended up shooting the bed. Like, if it went down tomorrow, I'd be fine. And it's like, that's sad if that happened, but it's also like my personal life wouldn't really, like, I still have a good relationship with my friends and family. And that is something that I think when you have a good control of that, it also makes it easy to do the challenging things because you have people supporting you. And so, emotionally you're kind of supported. But that's the problem. I don't really have an answer of like, oh, you got to do X, Y, and Z. For me, I liked working out. And so when I was training for marathon, when I was in that valley of despair. And so it's like, you still have things to look forward to. Even when it seems like there's not that much. I guess that actually is probably the best piece of feedback. It's like constantly try to have things that you're working towards. If you're not working towards anything, what are you even doing?
I see this a lot in the entrepreneur space where a lot of founders, they are actually very, very active, whether they're doing marathons or they're running. And I just had this thought now, and I'm thinking about it. Like, it's almost as if like because in entrepreneurship, you got to move fast.
Yeah.
You got to move fast, whether that be like having those calls, pivoting fast. So it's almost like people are more drawn to like marathons and working out as like a physical representation of like what they're internally like in entrepreneurship too. Is this something that you find like a lot?
It's probably, yeah. I think it's also like, it helps so much with stress. Like it regulates your hormones and emotions. And it just, when you can do this instead of like, I think Jeff Bezos had a really good line where he was like, when the stock price goes up, say you buy a stock, you're doing one of the gambles, like actually I did in 2021. You're on super like cloud nine. You think you're the smartest guy in the world. You made all this money, but then when it dips and you're low, you can't also have that be like, I'm an idiot. Like, why did I do this? And it's like, he made a really good point because he's been like, when you run a company that's publicly traded, I think it's really tough. And even I can understand to a small degree by owning some shares of volatile companies, you sometimes will attach yourself to this like dollar sign and this worth when it's like, if it's having a good day, you're having a good day. Bad day, you're having a bad day. And it's like, you can't do that. And so you have to be consistently having good days. And how do you do that? And in my experience, for me, it's been through constantly working out, eating well, having good relationships with people, and like things that you look forward to, like going on a vacation, for example. You can still do that as an entrepreneur, but the reality is it's kind of, when you have deadlines, you can't plan things as much in advance. So it's like your vacations kind of have to be spontaneous, or like, I'm going to take the morning off as a bit of a break because I have an easy morning and I want to go try this new restaurant. So there's not really, like, you have to do things to manage your mental health. You can't be constantly going all the time. Otherwise you'll fail. And you need to have patience because things will take longer than you think.
So it sounds to me like, if I were to summarize what you're saying in a saying that I'll coin right now, it's as if you need to balance external volatility with internal stability. What I mean by that is, externally, like you said, things are going to happen. Stock's going to go up and down. You can't control that, but you can control how often you run. You can control going to the gym. You can control how well you eat. And it's like that counterforce of stability over like kind of balances out that perceived volatility.
And even this morning of like, I didn't want to work out this morning, but instead of going for a run, which was what I was originally aiming to do, I went for like a brisk walk because I was like, I'm a little bit tired. Like, I don't really want to. So I was like, I'm not going to force myself to do something I hate, which is like sprint as hard as I can. But I also don't want to just go back home and go to sleep. So instead, I kind of like, I'm also gentle on myself in that way of like, I think it's very important to be gentle, to be like, it's a horrible day outside. It's kind of snowing. It's cold. Running is going to kind of suck on my breathing. I was already kind of coughing a bit. So just go for a walk for your 45-minute workout. So it's like, that's okay too. And then after this, at the end of the day, I'll do another 45-minute one in the gym upstairs. And maybe that'll be a bit better. And if not, that's okay too. Maybe I'll just do stretching the whole time. And it's like, that's okay. As long as I'm kind of still progressing. Not every day is going to be stretching, but even if most days are stretching, that's still okay too. That's still progress. I'm still conscious of what I'm trying to do. And it's like, I know it won't last forever. I'm not going to always have mornings where I'm feeling tired. So that's just the most important thing, is just to stay calm and to keep moving forward. All the cliches that everyone talks about, kind of lean into them. I've noticed them a lot more. They're so true.
What are the cliches?
Oh, of like, just keep calm and keep moving on, of like, don't worry, be happy, like, oh, like go for a walk outside. All these like weird sayings, stuff your mom says. Oh, make sure you're not on your phone too much before bed, like read before bed, don't eat right before bed, don't eat like shit all the time, like try to limit how much sugar you have, especially at night, try not to have too much caffeine or energy drinks, all these things that we know. It's like, try to live by them more and then just be disciplined. And then all of a sudden now it's like, your whole quality of life gets risen and you feel good. And this becomes the new norm now of like, I can't remember the last time I've had like a Red Bull. And it's like, that's a good thing that I'm not having those. These drinks are not good for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, a lot of people say, oh, it's okay in moderation. It's like, I guess, but it's like, isn't it better if you don't have the things that are bad for you? It's like not drinking. Like I'm not drinking. I know you mentioned you weren't either. Like that must have been something that you clearly understand this isn't really helping.
There was a clear link between performance and And interesting you say that, because I think a lot of people have like this cliche block or this cliche filter. Like when they hear these things, they hear them so much that they just like, oh, obviously what's the new thing? What's like that new thing that I could do, right? So it's interesting. Just like listen to the things. There's a reason why cliches are cliches. It's because mostly they're true, and obviously people are gonna take that into like people are gonna take that and go into the race immediately. You know, but
it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be like the positive things that like it. And context is so important with everything, of course. Not every statement is going to be true. Not every cliche is true for everyone. Like if you need a coffee every morning or a Red Bull is like what you need, great, have a Red Bull.
Do you drink coffee?
No, not at all.
Not even coffee?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything? Not substances, but I meant like even multivitamins?
Yeah, I'll do 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. I used to do a multivitamin, and then like now I'm a little under the weather, so I'll have a ton of like vitamin C. I try to have that. There's some like multivitamin for men. Stuff like I only cook with like olive oil or like butter. I've actually realized I think my days of 2% dairy milk have started to come to an end. My whole family has gone away from 2% milk. I grew up with it. I love it, but it's like I notice I break out when I have it. Like all of these sort of health implications that I'm like, I can't have dairy, and I'll still have cheese now, but even cheese, I'm like, maybe I should try cutting out cheese.
Yep.
And so it's like, why am I so attached to it? Just because I like milk? Like who the fuck cares? It's just milk. Maybe don't have it and I will feel and act better. And it's like, if that's my priority, it's almost a good parallel to business of like, you can't be too emotionally attached. If you're too emotionally attached to something, it may not work. And then you will feel really bad instead of just being like celebrating, oh, it didn't work, now I get to move on to the next.
And it's almost like, I find that when you are super emotionally attached to the outcome, it's always going to not happen.
Yeah.
Like almost all the time.
It is funny when you kind of are able to like, I have another saying for you. It's like when you're trying to find love. It's like if you're chasing after love constantly, you don't always really find it. It's when you kind of take a step back, work on yourself, that all of a sudden the butterfly that you're chasing after, you're never going to catch. And then when you're chill, oh, now it's going to come land on your hand.
That's so funny you say that, because I was literally going to say it's almost like you're running from happiness, but just lose yourself in the service of others, and the butterfly of happiness will just land.
And it's just way better that way too. When you're like working on yourself in whatever you're doing, whether it's business, love, like athletics, anything, even opportunities, they will come to you because you're continuing to do it.
And it's almost like, because if you're chasing, it means you don't have it in a way. And when you're in yourself, you're attracting, and it's like it's a vibrational match, to quote Bob Proctor.
Oh, absolutely.
You know that. And by the way, this is one thing I want to tell you, because you're into sleep, and I just saw this thing, so I want to share with you. I think I may have shared with you earlier, but there was like, so have you heard of this concept of grounding? Did I talk about this with you
on our first call? I think.
I talked about this. So like, I think I told you about the blanket, right? There's like some blanket you can get. It has like interwoven fibers or whatever, and it conducts some electricity in some way. And it's like you take it and you plug it in to your, like that port is a grounding port.
Yeah.
And you put it into the grounding port, and apparently like decreases inflammation, helps you sleep a lot better. So I want to try that. I'll let you know how it goes.
I really want to try 8 Sleep. You should
8 Sleep. What's that?
You should get sponsored by them. They are it's a heated and cooled mattress that will pair with your like Apple Watch. No, it's essentially, it's very, like, when you think about it, it's kind of low tech, but it's actually high, like a lot of pieces of tech paired together. Mm-hmm. It's controlled by a computer that essentially will, like, scientists have mapped out optimal temperatures for sleep. So like right as you go to bed, you should cool your body down. And then right as you're waking up, to wake up naturally, it should heat up.
Oh, so it does that?
It'll automatically, based on the sleep cycle you're in, because you sleep in cycles. Like and so this will program you to essentially sleep better. Everyone who's used it has loved it. And it's essentially optimizing how you sleep based on temperature, based on if you wear like an Apple Watch, you can sync that. So it'll give you a score then on your sleep, how often you move over, what your heart rate is, like all of these factors. So
I move a lot.
And that also is okay, but it's the type of thing of like, it will still track based on your heart rate. Like it's very scientific of like, when you drink, this is the impact it has on sleep. And so this is the reason a lot of people have said, hey, I don't want to drink anymore in the SF areas, because they are now, everyone's tracking their sleep and they're seeing the impact of what drinking does to their sleep patterns. They get worse sleep. They sleep for less time. It's lower quality. Their heart rate is higher throughout. And it's like, you really need to relax when you're sleeping. And if you're all high strung, you hop on a call or you just get done a ton of work, then try to go to bed, it usually takes longer than you think than if you're reading casually on the couch. And so all of these different things are affecting performance. And it's like, as soon as they started optimizing for that, the business side of it also optimizes, because it's like, I become the best version of myself, better equipped
business
to
is a
handle.
reflection of you.
Absolutely.
And this is something, so actually before we get into this, I want to talk to you about this. So it's almost like, this is the way I see entrepreneurship, and I think this is why it's hard for people. Entrepreneurship is a never-ending reflection of every single way in which you're inadequate. That's the way that I see it. You know, like if your team isn't performing, you're a bad leader. The good leaders do this, I say. Yeah. But if you're not getting you're bad at marketing, or if you know, so it's because I find like every time I'm better, the business is better. Like almost point for point. So, did you find something like this?
Yeah, I found it. It also, you're more equipped to handle stress. So those valleys of despair that you mentioned just become nice little walks through a forest. And it's like, it's not really a valley. It just is, nothing's blooming right now. All the seeds I've planted, nothing's really happened yet. But that's okay, because I know next couple times I try this might work. And even if it doesn't, that's okay too, because I've developed a system that it's like thinking longer term. You're thinking about yourself in the future. You're thinking about how you're going to respond in 5-10 years. And it's like, I'm going to still be very much the same, I hope, in terms of my like athletics, diet, sort of outlook. But the business in turn, hopefully that will grow and grow and grow and grow to a point in which it enables me to continue doing this. So this is also a byproduct of like me being able to work from home. And it just, there are certain things that enable that. But having like a business has been the best decision for my personal health, for my fitness, for everything.
It's such a good personal development tool. Yeah. Like I honestly see business as a personal development tool. It'll tell you, like, it's a reflection of ways you're bad. You know what I mean?
Is that what you felt running it for the first little while?
Oh yeah, man. Cause people aren't listening to me. I'm like, and I was like, what the hell's wrong with them? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a bad leader. I'm a bad communicator. And here's the thing, like, it's always your fault. Like that's the best mindset, because
you're accountable.
You're accountable.
And you hold yourself accountable.
And say, for example, you're managing a team, and say, for example, it is the team's fault. Well, even if it's true and you admit it, then you're not going to do anything. But even if it's not true, so this is why I think it's useful to hold beliefs that aren't true that serve you. Because if I think it's my fault, I'm going to do something about it.
Exactly.
And nothing
You're
ever
not going to wait
itself.
for somebody.
I'm not going to wait.
Yeah.
Nothing fixes itself.
And if the team is not capable of doing something, or there's a disconnect, you can also move on, let them go, or work with another team or partner or co-founder. It all applies.
Exactly. And like, if it's the team and then you go into another team and you fuck up, then guess what, buddy?
You got a pattern match, yeah.
Exactly. And this is something that I read in Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, which I absolutely love. If you haven't read it, absolutely recommend it. And he basically said that, SEAL teams have like Hell Week.
Yeah.
Or like it's 5 or a week of like where they get 4 hours of sleep in total, and they're just hammered. So they have like 6 boat crews, and each boat crew that they race, and they're basically saying like, if you lose, you do more push-ups, you're punished, and if you win, you get like maybe some time off. So they're basically training you at a pace to be a winner.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was, in this particular example, boat crew 1 or 2 was killing it all the time, and boat crew 6 wasn't. And so one of the majors over there was like, hey, why don't we just switch boat crew 2's leaders? Like, why don't we switch the leaders and see what happens, right? And immediately, next race, boat crew 2 was up top. Boat crew 2 was there. But boat crew 6 was also in the beginning, was also like right up there. So what they were saying basically was like, well, good leadership makes waves, but bad leadership is clearly visible.
Yeah, it's identifiable.
It's very identifiable.
Clearly, like,
no such thing as a bad team. There's no such thing as a bad team, bad leaders. I believe that.
And I'm sure they're like, and maybe there are people who shouldn't, like, there's always people who kind of don't want to pull up their own weight or perform, but that's a part of life. And sometimes I'm that person, or I have been. So it's
100%.
also like handling those interactions with respect, with dignity. And it's like, just because you may not be able to work with somebody doesn't mean that they're a bad person, or doesn't mean they're not capable of growing into that. It just like everybody's growing and everybody's learning. So it's a good mindset to have as well, of like, if everything is imperfect, you also have a lot of patience with people, because you realize it's like, you can't be mad at somebody who's also doing the same thing you're doing and just trying to grow and improve.
Exactly. And I think I want to circle back to something you said too about like stress tolerance. I was thinking about this, like on a very energetic level, entrepreneurs are basically master alchemists. And here's what I mean by that. I don't know if you know like what alchemy means. It's like the transmutation of one state to another. The traditional example is that of like gold into thing, but the more like the more like practical yogic example is like the transmutation of like negative emotions into positive ones, like fueling your anger, using these emotions and transmuting them into positive ones. So in the same way, like every major entrepreneur worth his weight who's made a lot of money is basically taking stress from the outside world, from clients, from people, and like transmuting that into cash. If you really think about it, like that's kind of our job.
Yeah.
Right.
It is. Yeah. That, in the longer scheme of things, it is.
Yeah.
But like, I'm going to bring up the Elon Musk book again, because it was just it was an impactful book for me, because it talked in detail about the SpaceX launches, where he had put all his money into launches that repeatedly failed. They had maybe one launch left. His brother, Kimball Musk. So these guys at one point, he sold his stake for like $200 million or $300 million. They had hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, from PayPal. And so when he exited that, because he was actually pushed out by his crew, like the David Sachs, the PayPal Mafia, all these guys who pushed him out. He ended up, this was like 2003 or so, started SpaceX, did a bunch of launches, failed almost all of them. On the fourth launch, he had run out of money basically completely. His brother had sold their last $375,000 worth of Apple stock. So his brother also was working on PayPal. So this family had a ton of money that they were basically down to almost nothing. They had put it all in the company, and he went back to his group of friends, raised money. And that's also another thing about never burn any bridges, because he was pushed out as CEO. They did not want him in the company as CEO anymore. He could have been like, fuck you guys, like this is a horrible mistake. He didn't. He just was like, oh great, maybe I disagree, but that's fine. Kept good relationships. They all put a ton of money in for the fourth launch. This is a very expensive endeavor to launch a rocket that blows up. Because the third one, they also had like NASA satellite. They had the remains of I think it was Scotty from Star Trek in. So this was they thought it was going to work.
Wait, what do you mean that the remains of Scotty?
So when you do so basically they wanted to do launches of satellites into orbit, and they had contracts to do that with like NASA and other space organizations. And so one of the launches that had failed, the third one, I believe, they had put the ashes of one of the original Star Trek cast in the rocket to be able to launch into orbit, which is a cool idea, but it blew up. And so there are not only the family has stakes involved, it's like these are real stakes. So when you have 3 launches that fail and you now have a fourth, you have to go tell people, hey, this one's going to work. You have to push past that. And they were talking about how the third one failed, but they knew exactly what it was, because they had a list of these potential fail points, and one of them was the baffling within one of the tubes, because when like a rocket, it has fuel and liquid oxygen and all this sort of complex materials. As it's launched, that can slosh around, and that can essentially push the rocket off of the equilibrium and cause it to like move around. So there was sloshing going on, but that was on the 11th on the list of priorities. And so everyone was like, shit, it was that. We know it's that. We know exactly what it is. That's the only thing that went wrong. And so they knew exactly what they needed to do, but they had no money. So when he came in and he said, we're going to do this, we know exactly what we're doing, he reinvigorated everyone, and everyone goes, we know exactly what to do. And in 6 weeks, we're launching another one. So he went, raised the money, everybody knew what to do. And so everyone was on the lowest possible low. You just blew up some dude's ashes and a satellite, and he was able to motivate people to get back on track. Yeah, it was, Scotty. I think it was Scotty at least. It was like, these are huge stakes, and obviously different scenario, but it's also okay to take inspiration from that and be like, you set the tone. You as the leader are the person who can either demotivate or motivate people. And so you being a positive force, immediately after that happens, they're all energized and ready to work at it again, when instead you could go drink and cry about it. And it's like
100%.
It's also okay to grieve, but there are certain times in which people need a leader to step up. And even during that difficult time where you want to cry and just like cover up and roll into a ball, which I'm sure he did, he was like, no, here's what we're going to do. This is the plan. I'm going to go raise money. I'm going to do this. And it worked.
Yeah.
And obviously now,
Like,
thank God it
thankfully.
worked. Holy.
I can imagine. And it's like, especially like if something happens 3 times, you're like, okay, well, what's going to be so different about the 4th?
That's the thing.
And how do you convince everybody?
That's the thing. And he must have had a really good plan to like, and it's only he could have done that.
Yeah, 100%.
Realistically. But how many, like, I just think sometimes like how many creative revolutionary stuff hasn't gotten off the ground, and it could have, because people have given up or they didn't try that one more time. It's like that meme about like you're just what was it? It's kind of a joke, but it's like you're only one gamble away from being a millionaire or something like that. It's that next spin, and it's like meant as a joke.
I'm gonna check
go
one
for it.
time quickly.
Do you want to clap just so that you know where it is?
I think we're good because I don't have a bad feeling. And good. Okay, we're good. Perfect.
I know we're kind of getting sidetracked there a little bit, but it's more fun that way, I feel like.
No, and that's why I only had a few questions, but I kind of wanted to go into it.
Thank God we didn't start at 4.
I know.
It would have been so dark already.
I know. Oh, where were we? We're talking about Musk.
Talking about Musk, yeah. So I like reading.
You want to put it's like in your, there you go.
I think reading's so important. Being literate and being able to kind of parse through information quickly is a super important thing.
I have this, okay, so.
What's your favorite book as well?
So, okay. My favorite book, so hard. This is actually difficult. Actually, I'll tell you what my favorite book is. This is not a run-of-the-mill book. It's called Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland. And it's basically about, it's a very interesting model of reality and how it works. And it works for me, but I'll give you the basic model. Like, they have a model of the universe. And the model of the universe is that everything that can exist, has exist, ever will exist, already exists somewhere in an information structure. And the way that things materially realize is through like a wave. So for example, let me give you an example. So imagine like water going through a tube. So there's water in a tube, and imagine there's a ring of ice going around it. So as it's going, the ice freezes, and then as the ice thing passes, this water melts and then goes normal, and the next part freezes, and it keeps going like this, right? So the next part's freezing, and the water's unfreezing as it's going. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's not that the water is potentially freezing; it's the potential for the water to freeze that's moving through it, because it's like the water. It's the same water that's frozen and then it's unfrozen. Does that kind of make sense to you?
I think so.
So what he's basically saying is that material realization is everything that can happen, will happen, has happened in an information structure, and like material realization happens in waves. Who causes the waves? No one knows. But so his idea is the way to and his model is called the alternative space model. So what it is like there's like sectors of reality, and each one of them has like a script and a scenery. So a script is like the direction the matter is moving, and the scenery is like the outward manifestation. So as an example, let's say me and you went to go see Macbeth, and the actors are wearing something, right? Are wearing a red or blue. If we were in a sector adjacent to it, just very slightly differently, if we went there, then maybe Macbeth would be wearing like something red and green, like just slightly different. The script is slightly different. And the further away the sectors are, the different the manifestation of reality is. So what he's saying is basically like to materialize realized sectors, it's done through like thought energy or thinking about something and like putting your energy towards its realization. It's basically like, if you want to think about it in terms we understand, it's like begin with the end in mind, and you have to connect with it and you have to feel it. Anyways, but there's some very interesting like ways that energy behaves energetically. So that's what I think was really interesting. But the way that I read books is slightly differently. And I don't think anyone else has done this before. But so there's something called resonance. And you know, resonance is like, there's a cup, and you see in the movies it's vibrating, and then it breaks, for example. So everything has a resonant frequency. Everything has like something that it like 50 hertz per second. So let's say the cup. So that means if you like play sound or light at 60 hertz, nothing will happen to the cup. At 40 hertz, nothing will happen to the cup. But at 50, the cup can now like accept the energy, right? And that's why it starts vibrating. So in my perception, as I'm reading books, have you ever read a book and like you're reading a line and it's like, whoa, and like you almost get chills in your body, and it's like, whoa, this is something really cool, and you could say like this resonates with you. So to me, it's like whatever this concept is like resonating with like your current state of being.
It's not just the frequency, it's deeper than that at times.
It's way deeper than that. So I'll basically read books until I get to that portion. And sometimes I'll like, this is why it's like very weird for me. Like sometimes I'll feel like I can't read this book anymore. And then I feel like I'm attracted to another book, and then I'll read that book and I get another like insight. And then I'll come back to the other book. So for me, it's like I don't hold myself to the standard as I have to finish it. I take the piece I need when I need it. And then when I'm ready for it later, I circle back. That's my perception. I don't think that's probably something very out there.
Yeah, it's a little bit new, but I understand it. It's like, it doesn't have to be so literal. I think that's the one thing that I'm learning a little bit more. And just in general, especially with like spirituality or religion, it's like, it's not always it's almost congruent from everything that I'm learning, especially when you start talking about details of religion or spirituality. But I think it can be very individualistic, and it's also okay to kind of understand themes associated with it. It doesn't have to, like, you don't have to get into specifically. If something resonates with you, it's almost like, how do you explain it? And so you're doing a good job of kind of hitting on that. It's similar to this, but it's a range, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. So things that, like the way that I would describe things resonating is probably similar to that, but maybe not exactly the same.
Exactly. So, yeah. And what about you? Like, what's your favorite book? What are some of the ones that you've like really...
Origins by Dan Brown. Really funny. It just is a very thought-provoking narrative. And I think it's something that really articulates well some of my feelings about certain things. It's not an anti-religion book, but it talks a little bit more about like creationism versus like when supercomputers get super good, it's more of a drama though, in a way. Like it's one of the things, it's a nonfiction book. And so it takes liberties with certain things, but I really like books that make me stop and like look things up. I really love that. When I'm like so immersed that I'm like, oh, what is this? It's like the Guggenheim in Spain. It's like, oh, I don't know what that is. Let me go look it up. And I go read a Wikipedia page. That is me growing. And I think those things I constantly am trying to find. And I think that's a part of what life is. Like the more you can continue to learn, the better you will be, even though it sometimes can get more difficult as you get a little bit older 100%. To put yourself in those situations. And
something that also, remember Elon Musk always, and this actually, I just connected the dots, like of this model of transurfing to like Elon Musk. Remember he said like, he's like 99% we're living in a simulation. So he says, in a way, like, if everything is so kind of, you know how they render video games? Have you seen how they render video games?
Yeah.
Where it's like the information is there, but it's only as the character is walking through it that part of it loads.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of how I see reality in a really weird way. Yeah.
To each their own. Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, who knows? And it's like,
who knows? But it's fun to just talk about it. Like who did that?
Yeah.
But I think that like the model of the world is important in one way or another. Like it doesn't matter which
positive
model, but it doesn't matter which model you use as long as the model is useful to you. Like a map is just a very low res representation of geography, but it's good enough for you to get where you need to go. So a model of the world or a mindset is similar. It doesn't have to be a direct representation of reality. It just has to serve as a map.
I agree.
Yeah. So Origins, is that coming back to like the origin of human species, kind of like the evolution? Or?
Not really. It's hard to. Essentially, just a guy like Elon Musk-esque who's developed a supercomputer that had, to a super high probabilistic degree, determined sort of where we had come from and where we're going. And spoiler alert, it had essentially there's like a theory called the primordial soup, where it's like we as humans came from like these hot vents that had all these sort of chemicals, that these first amino acids that were created, and slowly things started to form. It talks about entropy, about how like why is a snowflake so perfect? Like why, how come, like if you look in nature, you very rarely see sort of squares. How is that the case? And snowflakes,
like sacred geometry almost of sorts.
Kind of,
like platonic solids and like how they're...
A little bit of that. It's not very scientific, to be honest. It's more of like a drama about how then he had created this AI and this supercomputer that had proven to a very, very high degree that this was a reality, that we had come from a primordial soup, which everyone already speculated we were slowly evolved, but it adds another sort of definitive layer to that. Essentially, there's a bunch of really cool experiments that Stanford students had done where they had tried to recreate this on a small scale. I think it's called the Yuri Levine. If you search like Yuri
Levine, this sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's not Levine. Yuri something experiments from Stanford where they essentially tried to recreate it. Then they put it away. It just turned into this like mush, this like weird little soup. Put it in a closet. Then 50 years later, someone was like, "Oh, they rediscovered the experiment." Then they looked on it with spectrometers, and they found that the earliest signs of amino acids being formed, which are the building blocks for
life,
DNA and life, they were there, they were present, but it was just the environment for it to be sustained. It takes so long. Like, these are timescales that people don't understand. So it's like, how do you replicate molecules floating around in
for billions and billions
for like years? You're doing this, millions of years. So and then even then it sort of had a thought-provoking thing at the end where even though it had said it proved it, it had said, well, DNA is kind of instructions. So it's like, how can DNA form from that?
Exactly.
And so it doesn't necessarily negate that religion is a thing. It just is that like everyone's sort of idea of religion may not be as accurate. Like, if there's a God, the God's probably looking down and laughing at what we think he or she or it is.
Well, let's talk about this, because here's how I think about it. I think that religion is... So I think what happens is people may have certain mystical experiences where they have, like, say, downloads of information from whoever knows. Maybe their emotions are at a certain frequency where, like an antenna, they receive it. However, like an antenna, when they receive frequencies, it transduces it into something the person can understand. So in my perception, in religion, maybe these people did happen, and maybe they did have these messages, except when these messages were said, they were said to be very, very contextual to the time. Which is, if you read Joseph Campbell, a lot of it, what he says is like, there's all these cultures all around the world, independently, super far away from each other, who have specific deities of this, flood myths, all these kinds of things. And it's different in the way that it's like perceived, because it's very contextual to the environment and to where they grew up, to where they were. However, the ideas are generally similar. So what I come to think of it is like religion and all these things, there is a grain of truth to this transcendental experience. It's just that it simply was transduced into the contextual environment of the time. Yeah. So, and it's hard for it to, like, because Christianity has been around 2,000 years, Islam's been around 2,000, like, in a long time, they don't exactly translate these things to the modern world, which is why there's some degree of like dissonance.
Yeah, and people aren't being as religious anymore, probably because of that as well. Like, rates of Christianity are decreasing significantly over the past couple generations, and it's like people just don't relate to it as much. It's almost like if I told you...
They don't relate to it. That's exactly it.
If I told you I believed that Poseidon controlled the tides, you might be like, all right, but it's like, like, that was a normal belief several thousand years ago for the Romans or the Greeks. They had thought that these gods controlled things they didn't understand. So it's like, why is the lack of understanding being explained by gods? And in a way, it's like, and this is what the book essentially talked about. It's not necessarily my own personal beliefs, but I just think it's more of the themes of like love, kindness, and those are the things that I think are important that religions do touch on often that really help. It isn't necessarily like, oh, the blood of Christ you're eating. It's like, come on, we know it's just a piece of bread. It's like, nobody's really kind of refuting that. It just is that, like, if you can spend time kind of reflecting, being calm, like, those are, from my understanding, why people sort of like this. And I think that's also okay. It's also okay to have that in a world that it's super chaotic. Like, it's really hard to do anything. It's going to be difficult in Toronto for people to save for a house. And it's like, it's okay to seek solace and comfort in certain things like religion, but it's also good at times to challenge that, which is, I think, is my relationship with it. I was raised Catholic, but I think it's all right to challenge sort of certain beliefs, and some churches as well are better than others. Some, like, everybody is noticing this now as well.
And let's go back to this primordial soup idea, because here's the assumption of this. the assumption is it's all random, it's all chaotic, and it just so happened to pass. It's like the monkey and the typewriter, right? Eventually, if the monkey and the typewriter give it enough time, it's going to create Shakespeare. However, in my perception, it's like there seems to be some sort of universal, I don't want to call it a mind, but there is like a tendency in the universe for things to become more and more complex with time. And I can't, and it's so interesting because I read that like you believe a lot of science, you believe a little science, you're an atheist, you believe a lot of science, you believe in God. And the reason I heard this, I don't know if it was Einstein or someone, but he was like, they were looking at all these like tiny molecular compositions and like there's specific types of like for example, if the size of a hydrogen atom was just like 0.0000001 time larger than it actually was, none of this would ever be possible. So like there's like these immense equilibrium calculations within the world that it just seems to be, with the mathematical complexity of it, that there is a sort of organizing mechanism, whether you want to call that God, whether you want to call that universal intelligence. I don't think people disagree that there is something, they just disagree on the name.
Yeah, that, you know what, that is interesting, but
I would love to hear your perspective. I'm like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to frame this in a way that it's like, I understand. And even like, I remember talking to somebody and I was questioning certain things about Christianity, and he was saying, like, you can't just imagine having a jumble of car parts and then throwing them in like a blender and eventually it makes a car. And it's like, those are bad examples to try to describe it, because it's like entropy works in ways like snowflakes are created in these ways because that's the most efficient way that they're formed. It's not because some god decided snowflakes should be shaped totally unique, like these really awesome geodesic shapes. It's because that is the most efficient way to, in reality, disperse energy. And in a way, we're very efficient energy users.
Exactly.
Like we consume a ton, we breathe things out, and the only byproduct is heat, really. And so it's like, in a way, we are an efficient method for consuming energy. And that's kind of going back to what you're talking about energy in general, of like, that's kind of all that everything is about. So in terms of the primordial soup, the argument that I think I more of lean into is that like the formation of these complex strands to create these, I guess, beings and early sort of single cells and then multi-celled organisms, it's like those were efficient ways to dispel energy that was being produced in the case of like geothermal vents on the floor of an ocean.
But
so
why does it have to, like, here's my point. Here's my question. Why does it have to be efficient? Like, what is it that makes it be? Because it seems like the efficiency,
the laws of physics. Yeah. Who created the laws of physics to determine?
But I think who is the wrong question.
What?
I think who. Yeah, and something you mentioned.
It's earlier, more of a rhetorical, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you were saying, but something I want to point out. You said it like God did this. So when you say God, like I know what you're saying, but like in the conception of this like separate deity or like the separate thing,
whatever. You know what I mean? God, yeah.
So it's interesting how it is, because like the way that I found is like God will present Himself to you in whatever way you're ready for Him, and here's what I mean by that, like. If you want to see the beauty of things in the beautiful interconnectedness of nature, you'll see it there. If you want to see it in like just like random coincidences that happen, you'll see it there. So I think what people are arguing about is like your idea of it is wrong than mine, but when we're all just spitting bullshit about things we don't understand anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and rereading books that were written 2,000 years ago, it's like how accurate, like.
Well, how accurate, but like you said,
the time,
the themes, like the principles are timeless.
Well, some themes are.
Some themes
are. And so that's where it's like, and then you'll have sort of, it's so funny how religion can separate people, because now it's like some people hold some values within a book and then other people say, if you don't hold all of them, it gets to a very complex point, which I think alienates a lot of people as well. And it makes people not want to participate in sort of structures that are like this. And I think that's also something that like modern religion has a challenge in overcoming, because there's a lot of people that are a little bit older who don't want to cherry pick and they want to kind of stick to certain things that they've grown up with. So,
which makes sense, to each their own.
But the problem is sometimes those can be harmful to other people. So then this is where I think a lot of the conflicts come in, where people try to then impose their own beliefs. And I think the most important thing and this is a really good parallel walking backwards a little bit more to business of like, you cannot try to force something to be reality.
Yep.
You can pretend for a long, long time, but the reality of a situation is going to be known to you. And often times the entrepreneur, the individual kind of who is faced with that reality is the best person to know what to do. And so Musk said the reality is, no, we're going to space. We're only just getting to the point where we got in the 60s and 70s. So we know it's possible to launch things to space repeatedly. And just because those programs had winded down doesn't mean they can't be scaled up like he had done. So having that belief in yourself, having that belief in what you're doing, or maybe it's a higher power, I think is like to each their own. You know, you got to do what you think is best.
In terms of the higher power, there like, it doesn't necessarily have like there are I truly believe this. I think there are still forces out there we just do not understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's still forces. There's no equipment to measure them.
What do you think? Yeah. What do you think are some things that like we look back in the 1900s of like people who were smoking when they were pregnant, you know, and they were like, they're drinking and smoking and doing these things, and they didn't link doing this and deformities within childbirth. What do you think are things that we're doing now that we're going to look back on in 100 years and be like, why did we ever do that? Why did people of today do this?
TikTok dances, TikTok dances, those that haircuts, but like on a more realistic sense. Well, I don't know.
I think factory farming is going to be one of them.
Yes, that true. There's certain things I have in mind. I just don't want to say them for views, for very obviously things. But I agree with factory farm and you know what I think is absolutely insane about that? Because their animals are so close together, they put hormones as a preventative measure, but then they figured out that hormones actually make them grow bigger. So now no matter what, and did you know this? I don't know if you knew this, and someone might be correcting me here, but I heard that you can still say hormone free if you don't use hormones, but if one chicken you even suspect is sick, you can hormone them all and still say it's hormone free.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. Like this is paraphrasing, so don't quote me specifically on this.
Yeah.
But that is messed up.
Yeah. And there's like, we've done a good job lately. Like I think Canada and the US have good regulations that really have reduced that, but
I don't even know, man. Because like,
if you're trying to make money, do you know
what
like,
I mean?
Some people just don't care.
And FDA goes to Joe Schmo, who's a farmer, and Joe Schmo's like, yeah, everything's good. What, they're going to go and check every plant? They're going to go and test samples of everything? You know
Sometimes
what I mean?
they do. Sometimes they do have surprises.
I'm sure they do.
Like, and so it's like cows, for example, like but there are certain things that are like, there's an acceptable level of like pus that you're allowed to have in milk. And it's like, you're allowed
puss.
Oh,
Pus. Okay. I was like, what?
There's an acceptable level.
What kind of milk is this? What kind of milk are you buying this milk?
There's an acceptable level of pus that you're allowed to have in milk. And that's because it's like, they're attaching these suction devices to the cows that sometimes cause blisters and like bad things to happen. But it's like that is the reality. So it's like, there are these weird things where people don't realize that actually is happening.
Yeah. Like when you're eating spiders in your peanut butter.
Oh yeah. And like
tons of spiders.
I actually didn't really know that much about that. How many spiders are in your peanut butter?
Like, I don't know specifically.
30 spiders a year or something like that?
There's like a certain amount of parts per million.
Some guy is eating a ton of spiders in peanut butter.
Some dude out there
affecting that statistic
is munging down on spiders.
Yeah, it's high protein.
It is. I mean, that's why. You know.
Would you ever eat the yeah?
I haven't, but I'm down. I have no problem.
I would do it as well.
Yeah, high protein, but like, if we're talking about Snowpiercer levels of nasty, I'm not eating this ground up. By the way, where the hell do they get those? Where the hell do they come from?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Wild. Yeah. What the hell were we talking about?
I don't know. Elon Musk. Religion.
Yeah. Actually, something very interesting. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see how like different frequencies of sounds, what they look like?
On sand?
Yeah. Have you seen that?
I've seen that video.
That's super interesting. Have you seen that other video where it's those geometric patterns, but some guy put 3 and it made a human face like perfectly?
Really?
Yeah, that was kind of really interesting to me. Like I wear this thing right here. Like I don't know if I ever showed you this thing.
No.
But have you seen this pattern before?
No.
It's called the flower of life. So it's like it's a circle and then a circle and then a circle and it's like keeps going round and round. But so the idea is like everything. Creation tends to follow like this pattern. So it's like when you're first born, you're a cell, and then you're 2 cells, and then you're 3. It's like the way that you updivide happens to follow this pattern, which is why I think it moves in. So there is like a bit of an, I hate to say it, there's a bit of an order to the chaos. And every system in which there is chaos, there's like a greater order. Like, for example, weather is chaotic, but there's a greater order of climate.
Lightning happens because like a buildup occurs and of static electricity, and it needs to dispel itself. And so it's like these things are like it seems chaotic, but there's almost order within the chaos.
There's always order within the chaos. So the Taoists, they're smart guys over there. Yeah. Back to business. A couple more here for business. Are you still good?
I'm still good.
Good time? Okay,
I'm laughing. Yeah.
You know how long we've been going right now? Guess.
I don't know, like 2 hours.
No, an hour 12.
An hour 12.
Okay,
Plus the original.
Plus the original. Oh yeah, so in total. Okay, I got a couple more here.
Your editor is gonna have a fun time cutting this down.
He's gonna love it. He actually told me he likes like conversations where it goes all over. He learns a lot. So back to business. So, and this is something I think they missed. They may have asked you in Dragon's Den, but I forgot what they were saying. In the world of tech and drones, there's constant need for innovation because technology is going pretty fast. So how do you ensure that your team kind of stays creatively inspired throughout it? Is there, or what role does creativity play within Hover?
We're pretty lucky in the industry is super forward thinking. So there's really no playbook. So kind of anything that you do is kind of falls into that category. I would say though that it's encouraging the creativity, encouraging people. I like to let people kind of do whatever they want. It's like we have structure in the morning where I say, hey, this is what we need to get done. And I always leave time for them to not only think, but also to like kind of do things in a manner that isn't exactly what I had thought. And kind of giving people that space when, like, if you're picking good people to hire, they're naturally going to show that drive. Like, you want innovative entrepreneurial people to do. The problem is when you get people who are super entrepreneurial that you want on your team, they almost want to start their own thing.
Exactly.
And so that's what ends up happening a lot of the times. All the best people are all running their own companies. And that's the funniest thing of why people will do things like acqui-hire, or as you start to do this, it actually is probably the best career progression move you could make, which is doing your own thing, because people want to be around entrepreneurs. Like, I've had access, I think before I applied for like Deloitte Consulting or something in like second or third year for a summer internship, didn't even get an interview.
Wow.
And it's like, now I'm inviting the like senior consultants to the events that I'm hosting. And these types of sort of creative thinking and just the fact that you're in this space are really helpful. Like, the smaller the team, bringing the team to events, doing socials together, and like, these are all things that really help with the
socials. I agree. I just had a big thing last Saturday. So how do you, and this is because I want to learn from you as well here. So how are you running your team meetings? What is your structure? How do you manage tasks? Is it within Notion? Is it within Asana? Like, what is your organizational system? Because I need to get better at this.
I've gone through Trello, Monday, Asana, Notes, Notion, like everything. For me personally, I use Apple stickers. And that's how I do my personally. Yep. They're always on my desktop, and it's organized by like personal, staff,
what do you mean
business.
Stickers?
They're called stickies, Apple stickies.
Yeah.
I use those. It literally is stickies? Like go command space and type in stick, and it'll pop up.
Wait, command space?
Yeah, and that's a search bar, and type in stick, and it should pop up.
Oh.
And then hit new sticky, and essentially it's an app. It just opens in it's like Notes, but it just stays on your desktop, and you just write bullet points, and that's literally how I do.
And what about your team? Like,
we use like Trello for project management. We use Notion, like. But it's very much more of like, what do you need to do today? And we're all on the same page. We'll have like shared Google Docs with stuff on it. It's very organized in my opinion, but I think it's simple. It's easy. Simple
is the key. In terms of like Trello, like, do you get your team to manage like their own tasks and put them, or do you input the tasks, or how do you match like, and how do you get them to use it? Because
I get them to do it. Great point. Originally I was doing everything and assigning it to them.
Yeah.
You have to get them to take ownership.
That's what, dude, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But how do you do this? How do you get them to take ownership? Do you like in the meetings, hey, this person did ownership?
Is every day. So to answer the first question you said as the second part, we have weekly team meetings where it's like an all hands for like half an hour
Twice or
an
once?
hour, once a week.
Okay.
And then every day we have a scrim, 10 minutes long. Hey, checking in. So not only does that hold people accountable, including myself, of like at the morning, right at 9 a.m. when we start, everybody gets on a scrim. So
love
it's
that.
an all hands, but it's actually
doing it right
not
now.
because we have a small team. It's so much
how many in your
easier.
team?
4 full-time and 6 part-time.
And all 10. Oh, so 10.
Yeah, 10. But
So
the
10 are
part-timers are not always on. It's mostly just the 4, like the 10 on our weekly meetings, but 4 on the scrims each morning, including myself as well. So we end up just with like, what are the priorities for today? I share mine, they share theirs. What do you need help with? How can we help you? It can sometimes be 2 minutes long. It can sometimes be 20 minutes
That's
long.
so simple.
But it's like what it does is and it's always video on. All this bullshit about video off. It's like, we're not kids in school trying to lie in bed. It's always video on. And it's just, but this is the thing. I have to hold myself to it. And so a couple summers ago, I was not doing that. And so then I was noticing people are matching my level of intensity and
Every
energy.
time.
And so it's like, you have to be the person who is doing the most. If you are not doing the most, nobody else is going to go past you. It's not their company. Why do they care about doing the most? So then when you have the incentive structure, that's also where a co-founder can help. That's also where a network can help as well, of like, if you're surrounded or living with people who are going to work every day and going to work in an office and you're asleep all the time and you're like watching TV when they come back, everyone's going to be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I thought you were trying to build a company. And it's like, you're watching TV in the middle of the day and you're sleeping in. It's like, it's so easy when you have other people who are doing this. And I'm guilty of like sleeping in and doing some of these things myself. And as I mentioned earlier, it's okay to do that as like a break at times, but
so you can never expect more from people than you expect of yourself. Like people will always like your best people will almost just lag behind your most effort.
Oh yeah.
Kind
of. The trick is to find people who are better at you at some things. So you can't have a rock star who's way more competent than you and you're getting paid like more than they are and you have more equity, because they're not gonna like, there's gonna be a difference there.
Yeah, like the best people, like they want skin.
And you kind of need to improve yourself then. And they want skin in the game. Sometimes you can do things like, because I didn't pay myself, a lot of these interns were making more than I was, and I was working harder than they were.
And I'm always laughing, yeah.
It's kind of like, it's very easy for me to be like, hey, what's going on, man? Like, you didn't do this. Or, hey, the output in this wasn't very good. And then all this, like, they never are going to be like, oh yeah, like, oh no, what are you talking about? It's like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. Like, I understand. And it's like, the job is not to make them feel bad. The job is for everyone to perform better.
Exactly.
So it's like,
they have to understand that.
And by them seeing, and I'm very transparent of like what is going on in the situation so when people know that they are making more money than I am, they're getting equity and they're seeing me work harder than them. It's a really good environment. They want to work hard. They want to succeed. It also it's hard, even remote. It's fine. I just love being in person. You have those soft interactions and you can spend the 8-9 hours a day in the office.
Are your people in the office with you when you have the scrums?
They used to be, yeah.
But now
so
it's
we had because Techstars provided us an office and we have WeWork now, but it just is, everybody is kind of like moving around and because of the industry that we're in, there's not that many people with a specialty in drones. And so I would rather have the best who work remote rather than settle for somebody just because they want to come into the office.
100%. No, this is really good. Like I do 2 weekly meetings. But the 10-minute scrums are a good idea. Just like, hey, let's align priorities. You could even not have like, if you're doing a 10-minute scrum every day, you don't really need the team meeting. But the one thing about the team meeting is like having an agenda set. Like realistically, as a leader, in our early stages, we're doing everything. Really, only when you have a large team can you stop doing a lot of the things. But as a leader, your only job really should be to manage people. Yeah.
So it's like, that is the end goal. And so I think about, how do I create systems in place so that I can do that? Early stages, like we're still early now. So I'm doing a lot of it as well, like hands in the trenches with everybody, but it's kind of a normal part of it.
I like okay, I've got some really actionable stuff here right here, and I hope the audience will find that useful too. What is a very common misconception about a tech CEO that you want to debunk, if you have any?
Everybody thinks most tech CEOs are broke as fuck. Everyone thinks, oh, they've got a ton of money. First off, it's company money if they raised. Most people don't raise. Second off, the pressures when you raise are so enormous, it's almost not worth it. And I haven't raised nearly as much as some of these other guys, but I'm feeling some pressure from raising a modest amount. And that is like, I'm like, whoa, I don't know how these guys do it when they're having to pay for like a 50-person team and payroll and they're not making any money or their revenues are declining. The biggest it's funny because everybody is like, oh, these billionaires, most of them aren't liquid.
Yeah.
It's like Jeff Bezos was talking about how he rarely has more than 20 million liquid in his account at any one time. And this guy was at one point the richest guy on earth. And it's like, that's a really good indicator of how hard it is to make money. Not that like, woe is me, because these guys have all these options. And then you get credit when you have that kind of money.
You get the loans and you get off your share.
You can do tons of stuff with it. Like, you obviously have more options, but it's more of just that, like, it's so hard to get liquidity, and liquidity is just like the term of like money in the account. Yeah. So it's like, these employees might have shares, but you want to try to work towards something to get them liquidity or for yourself. So it's like, the real value is not a salary when you're building a company, it's the equity. And so it's like, how do you actually have a liquid event where you have something that you can kind of put in your own?
IPO is, and that's,
IPO is one of them, but it's like, so few companies actually do an IPO. So it's like, you're more likely to get acquired or just continue to run a profitable business. So if you're not profitable, you really only get to be acquired or you go IPO. And both of those things are not super likely to happen anyways. So it's way better to try to build a profitable business in terms of just statistics, but it's also like to kind of do a little bit of both, shoot for the fences as well, because it's the type of thing when those work, they really work for everyone involved.
And what's interesting about entrepreneurs, and this is how I'm tying it back to also spirituality as well. Entrepreneurs are very similar to how nature solves the problem. Like, nature solves the problem of how do you get these organisms to survive. So what nature does is it creates like an unbelievable amount of variety, and then everything that just doesn't work just dies off. And one of the few that has the key traits survives.
And how do you know that you're one of the few? And how do you know which is right? You don't. So that's why investors make tons of bets, and they're hedging their bets.
So you just make as entrepreneurs, we start so many things, we plant so many seeds. One of them is bound to grow, basically.
Yeah.
But it's having the emotional stability and the stress tolerance to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, and most people fail, and that's the reality of it.
Which is fine.
Totally fine.
Because you're not failing, because you're learning.
But like, people aren't focusing on that, and it's like, I've had so many failures so many times of just things that haven't worked, clients that don't want to do work with me anymore because it was subpar, like things that just you learn from, that I only got that experience from doing it.
Yep.
So it's so difficult to do that I think you just kind of keep going out there, and time is the biggest delta that you can control. It's really one of the only things you can control. So the longer you're in there, the higher the likelihood is that it'll work. So
interesting. I love that. Okay, I got a couple more here. Then I think it's time that we wrap out soon here, but I got some really good ones. So balancing personal life with CEO can be challenging. So how do you manage the balance? And do you have any sort of higher power or any of these beliefs that you do that kind of hold you through it, or maybe not even like a higher power, but like, is there some sort of like vision of the future that's kind of like guiding you towards it?
Yeah, definitely. I like, drones are going to be an integral part of the society in the future. Yeah, there's going to be infrastructure that's going to be built. It's almost, it's funny because I'm less optimistic about EV tools, which are kind of like the personal helicopters, almost like a flying car, basically.
I think there's lots of novelty. Yeah,
there's certain physics involved that it'll take too long to get into, but essentially it's like the noise that's produced, the amount of air that has to be moved to lift a person, the safety regulations. It's going to be like New York in the 80s, where they tried to do a lot of helicopters on every building. And then what happened is they had two accidents, or one major accident, where the helicopter fell off of the roof, killed a bunch of people. And overnight, the helicopter industry in New York City just went gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was a cool thing. You could be like in Manhattan and go to like, you can travel around in helicopters on rooftops of buildings. So all these execs were loving this because it's like the company's paying for it, or they're just rich, so they get to do it. Everyone thought this is really cool. Like, you can travel to the airport from like the Chrysler Tower, all these really cool spots. And the reality is that never ended up panning out. And so I kind of am less optimistic about the eVTOL network, but the reason drones are still really, really exciting to me is because, one, we're early, and two, there's so many different use cases. It's not just like transporting people. That's the only one for really eVTOLs. It's emergency response. It's asset management. It's helping with building surveys. It's in entertainment. You can have light shows. It's for delivery. It's for fun. It's for movies.
Spider-Man.
There's like tons of these and so the way that I see it is that technology is just continuing to get better, that I've actually niched down into a really good one, which is delivery, so that we can focus just on that and having the infrastructure. It's almost like electric vehicles before there was much infrastructure available. It seemed kind of shitty at first. Nobody really wanted one. And there are lots of cons associated. Like, we can't fly in certain conditions. We can't deliver it yet to your balcony. We want to, but that's a vision. Having that where these are more widespread, they're doing things that people don't want to do. We don't want somebody to have to drive across town in a 2-ton vehicle. We want those drivers to be able to be retrained to become the remote operators managing 25 drones at once.
Never even thought about that. That's right. Like, how would that even work? But it would be like some guy with like the guy in the chair with the screens,
it's
and he's just
a
like,
remote facility because in the event,
it's like exactly like how planes do it. You know how like there's air traffic control?
kind of, yeah. Imagine like an air control sort of center, but that can be because of how latency is getting so low, especially with like the 5G
What's
networks.
latency
Is like the time in between. So like when I play video games, the latency or ping, the higher the latency is, the worse the time is between my input and what actually happens.
Oh, I see.
So the compute, like the device has to go to the server, to the internet. Sometimes it'll go to space. Like that is latency. And so when you have low latency, it basically is able to do things like you can download a massive file super, super quickly because you have 5G low latency. It's like immediate. And so when you have this, the drones are able to have such a high degree of precision in terms of where they are, what decisions they make, and it's streamed in real time. And so all of these things can be done much more efficiently. So already there are drones for police response, where a drone will autonomously launch when someone calls 911, and it'll live stream what's happening to a dispatch center.
Oh, and I never thought about that, because one of the crazy, like when crimes happen, like one of the crazy things is response time. The criminal can get away, but if it's like right away, something's triggered.
Yeah. We pivoted away from like that's probably I was like 22 when I tried to propose that, but it's like I'm glad I pivoted away from that. Not only did I not have the like ability to sell to police services as a 22-year-old, the tech just wasn't really there yet. Some of the BVLOS licenses I mentioned earlier, they've now come into play. And so all of a sudden this technology is there's a framework available for it. The technology works and exists, and realistically you just need to connect the two. Mm-hmm. And so my vision is having these systems not going to be used for every circumstance. There's still going to be cars, but you're going to start to see it increase in use. And then it's going to hit this hockey stick plateau where everybody's going to be using it.
And it's going to because we're still early. It's like the early adopters.
We're the leaders in Canada for drone delivery, and we've done a few thousand.
Wow.
That's how early we are.
So you're really you're in it for the long term here. Because it's still, who knows how fast it's going to happen, but I totally see what you're saying. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and how has it influenced you?
I don't know if I've received this, because like I was mentioning, the mentor calls, you don't really sit down and they're not like, oh, this is what you have to do. It's more of situational. It's like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm a little bit tired. Like, this didn't really work. It's just patient. You have to be patient. If you don't have patience, you won't be able to succeed. And that's the best sort of piece of advice that I've been inadvertently given and learned myself. You need to be able to be patient, because things do not take the time frame that you arbitrarily set. It's okay for you to be wrong, and you have to have a time frame, but it never is what you think it is. And so if you're patient, who cares what the time frame is, because it's going to eventually happen.
And how do you define patience?
I think it's a good question. How I would define it is probably working towards a goal without clear validation or clear results, and not altering from that set goal. And so what that kind of means, in using a little bit more words than that to explain it, is like, when I believe that drones are going to become widespread, how do I get myself to be one of the leading companies that's doing that, to help lead the charge, so to speak? Mm-hmm. That is through constantly be doing deliveries, do as many as I can. And so the patience that I have is that, like, I know one way works. I'm going to continue to do this way. We could raise a ton of money and scale it to 50 pizza locations because we signed the partnership. And now all of a sudden it's like, that's not how we want to do it. We want to do it slow, incremental. And you want to do things in a way that you need more information. You want to launch in a way that makes sense, where you're collecting valuable information and you're ensuring that is something that is, it's reasonable, the scale at which you want to grow, but it's ambitious, but it isn't too much, because a lot of companies will fail before they get their feet under them.
Yeah. And so it sounds to me like this is what Alex Hormozy said, and it sounds like you kind of embody this. It's almost like patience is just like, what do you do in the meantime?
That's a good way to to kind of get there.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. What's one trend in the tech industry that you're excited about, and how do you see it shaping the future?
I think we basically now, if you have an Apple Watch, you have an iPhone on your wrist.
Yeah.
And I think that is going, like, this is kind of hilarious because I think I'm going to get roasted for this, but I absolutely would be the type of person that would have some sort of like implant or something that would enhance performance. Absolutely.
Like in your brain?
Maybe. I don't want to be the first.
Yeah. You want
but I mean, it's like, I'll be like the 10,000th person to do it after like 5-10 years, but I would. It just is like, it's like we don't really fully understand the brain now, and so this is why some of these things have to take place where there's going to be trials and errors of it. And I hopefully don't want to be a person that has like is part of one of the errors that occurs, but I just think being able to like have a contact lens that has like can display things, or even just like the basic of glasses, like the new Apple Vision Pro that's coming out, that's going to be really cool. I'll probably buy one of those. Yep. And it's like those are steps towards it. I absolutely think like we have the Aura rings now that are coming in. When you're sleeping, your data is being tracked by the 8 Sleep if you're using that. And so I think having systems that are kind of more deeply embedded within you is going to be some of the next step of like, you know, if you can do certain things of like people losing limbs can fully replace it. And I think there'll be a point at which people might be like, wow, the technology is so good. I would almost rather have certain things than the regular.
Yeah.
Because of how much better it is. And even stuff like, I think Gene doing the like going in and preventing sort of diseases and illnesses if you're predisposed to that of what's called not gene splicing, but what's the do you know the technique that I'm talking about? CRISPR. Yeah. Doing something like that, I think that's going to be more widespread. I think it's just going to become too in demand. Governments are going to, like, they're already kind of banned now, but governments are going to get ahead of it, and they're going to say, hey, it's going to be allowed for things like cancer or for like diabetes or things that is so clear that are going to, that shouldn't have. We don't want kids to have cancer. How can we reduce the likelihood of that happening?
Exactly.
So it's like, that can be done through stuff like CRISPR. And I think those things are going to be, there's going to be a lot of pushback, especially from religious people of like, how come this is happening? But I genuinely think that's going to be where we're headed to, because I think it's going to create like, we can eliminate some of these illnesses and disease that have plagued us for so long through the use of technology.
The one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, this playing devil's advocate, is kind of like the folly of man, right? Like we ask, why do we, like we ask, can we do it? Why should we? And the one thing that I'm kind of a little bit scared about is like, first of all, I understand like if your brain gets to process information faster, but I'm like, well, so what if that gets into the hands of the wrong person, or the wrong person uses that for something that, you know, heinous? Ultimately, though, in addition to that, like I was watching this movie on Netflix the other day where it was like there's a big EMP attack, and then just like what if, or like when someone hacks into your brain, like that's kind of the
you can do
scary
like
part.
offline, like you're right. There's no perfect system, but you could also say the same thing about when cars were invented and people had horses. So like horses are just more reliable. Like the cars sucked initially. We don't have roads. Like why would we, like it's all cobblestone. It sucks on these shitty wheels. Like it hurts my back when I'm driving around. It's going to destroy an industry. There's all these sort of like objections that you could have done of like cars are dangerous. They're going to explode. It's, what do you mean an internal combustion engine? Like how does that work? And I just think that like if it's, and that wasn't even, I think that's not even close to the level that we're trying to get with, we're eliminating disease. I think disease, that goal is way, way better than trying to be like, oh, we can transport things and people faster.
But don't you think, and I'm still playing devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
But don't you
it's
think
more entertaining that way?
If there is disease, it serves a purpose? Like, don't you think that nature, like just like, for example, like we were talking about the thunder,
so like survival of the fittest Darwinism? Kind
of in the sense where it's like, there's a very delicate balance of forces, and if we start playing with it too much, don't you think like something will fight back against that, either to decrease population, or if we eliminate disease completely, there'll be some sort of different, like this is kind of the thing that
I think we're actually going to have a population crisis because nobody wants to have kids. And so it's like, I think we're going to hit a plateau in terms of...
Which is why we're doing all this immigration right now, by the way.
Well, it's kind of genius on the part of Canada and the States. Like basically just, I think that's how you, like, don't even go to war with people, just do a brain drain. Like if China or Russia are being aggressive, just incentivize the smartest youth to come to the Western civilization and live a great life.
A brain drain.
It's a common term, but it's like, the countries don't like that their smartest youth are going to the States and Canada away from like India, China, like they don't like that because the smartest people, they see what's happening in like San Francisco, even in Toronto to San Francisco. If I was getting a project manager job here and like I'm qualified, I have a master's degree, whatever, not me, but just like in general, you might get like 75K to 100, 110K starting Canadian. In San Francisco, very comfortably, you'll get 150 to 200K US. And even though the cost of living there is more expensive by a factor of maybe like 25% plus the US dollar, the salaries are double. Like people are in New York running a tech startup, hiring engineers in Montreal because they can pay the engineers 80K Canadian, good salary.
Yeah.
But that's what, 60K, 62K US. So now you only have to budget 62K and you like all of a sudden that in New York would be like 200K USD salary. So you're getting so much value out of it. Even in Canada, that's why a lot of people are going to the States.
Yeah.
And so we're offsetting some of the population loss by doing immigration, which has helped us in many ways. But it's also the type of thing of like, you can only do that for so long. And you really need to promote people wanting to have kids.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. Like
there's a natural order to things. And it's like,
I just think I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to eliminate these diseases. And I think you wouldn't necessarily pick everything because then you're going to get people who want to be tall and
that's the inevitable, like,
but maybe that happens. Like people are, when you adopt a kid, you can kind of already know what age, what like gender, like you can kind of already do that. So, and that's been doing it for a long time. Even like plastic surgery can change people's appearances. Like, not that I'm saying it's a good thing, but it just is that like, I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think the real honesty is that people would pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah,
and
100%.
When you have a consumer demand for something, it's likely like people are already starting to do this. So,
yeah. And
like I would want to give my kids almost a 0% chance or a 0% chance if I could pay for it of having these terrible illnesses later on in life, like dementia, like all of these really crappy things from happening. If I'm predisposed to certain things, certain cancers, for example, like I would want my kids to not have that. I don't know.
That's fair.
And I understand it, but like, I understand people's objections,
like death
but
serves a purpose.
You know, and we're not saying to eliminate death.
Of course.
We're just saying to like, you're increasing the quality of life. We're doing it every day anyways, of like when we're trying to find out the best things that we eat or don't eat, of like I want to live as long as I possibly can. And I think that's okay to want. I understand that it's like there are cycles in life, but I also think it's okay to try to create a system in which I'm comfortable for longer. Like the life expectancy has continued to go up and we're still kind of going up, but I feel like new breakthroughs are going to push that past
that's true.
A high age.
And so actually something I want to talk about just before that you said this about the brain drain. So they did the study. I forgot quite where they did the study, but I know this. I know like the basics of it. They did a study where basically they had, I think it was the World Health Organization, something like this. And they're like, we have a finite amount of resources. What is the single best thing we can invest in order to give like the world a fighting chance? And what's the best thing whether that be climate, like whatever it is, like what do you think it was? Because I have
GMOs.
GMOs. No.
What was it?
It was feeding children from birth to 21 because of the devastating effects of malnourishment on brain development.
Wow. Yeah.
Isn't that like...
it makes... I did work with running and reading and I completely understand it. When kids don't have food, they're like, you can't get them to do anything.
Yeah.
So we would run with them, feed them a snack, and then even the kids with the most severe ADHD would be like calm, sitting down, reading. And it's like that's a very interesting thing because they're a little bit more tired because they've got all the zoomies and they were able to work out essentially and run around for an hour. And then now they're able to sit and read. And literacy is so important for just overall development. Like 100%. You need to learn how to read and write. You need to be able to have the brain development
to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yep.
That's very interesting. So I think we've gone literally twice as long, 3 times as long as we did the first time. Cameron, man, honestly, this is the best podcast I've done so far. This is the most that I've learned and I've absolutely loved it. I would love to have you again on sometime. do you want to leave the listeners or the watchers anything else? Where can they find you? Where are your socials? What are you up to next? Do you have a newsletter?
Yeah, we do. Cam ROWE. So Cameron.
Well, why'd you put that on the screen?
CAMRROWE is my Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Hover Direct is the full name of the company. We just call it by Hover. You can just search Hover Drone Delivery. Will pop up there. We do have a newsletter for Hover. We typically try to keep it a little bit more internalized. DM me if you're interested in being on this. We share a lot more on what we're working on, projects, partnerships, that sort of stuff. I post a lot on my LinkedIn. I would say try to follow me there if you want to kind of keep track with what we're doing with the business. And yeah, if you're an entrepreneur in Toronto, come out to Fresh Founders. It's a really great group.
Where is that? I'll come out.
Yeah, come on out.
Let me know when the next one is.
About a month from now.
I'm down.
We'll reach out.
100%.
We pay for everything, drinks, food, and we go out to we do some cool events together.
I'm down, man. That sounds awesome. Well,
Awesome.
honestly, Cameron, thank you a lot. This has been great.
Thanks. Nice to chat with you, Paul.
You too, man.
Bye,
Peace.
guys.
Dude, that was good.